are hoping to have a couple other council members. Mr. Parks, what I'd like to do is consent on item number 3. If you're okay with that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Item number 1, we'll just go to item number 1. That's unfortunately the only consent item I think I have.
Item number 1 is communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Ms. Rita Robinson to the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board.
We know you're going to have a hard act to follow on the MTA board.
Absolutely.
With Mr. Parks. Rita, I just clearly we all know who you are, and we know your qualifications and your role as general manager of the Department of Transportation. I think this is the first time a general manager of the city's Department of Transportation has ever served on the MTA. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I think we're very excited about that you're going to be our advocate and one of the 4 city appointments. If we don't have, I don't know if it's Senator Knight or Assemblymember Knight who's trying to take away all of our representation, or one of our representatives, but I think you have been around the process and the importance of the communication and connection with the city, and I think the appointment by the mayor was great, but you will have a hard act to follow. Mr. Parks, who with both his budget experience and transportation experience was a great member of that MTA. But I know you will continue to keep us informed of what's going to be happening there in that location. So, Mr. Parks, did you want to ask any?
No, I just want, how many positions have you held in the city, general manager? You lost track?
3.
3, okay. No, I just, yeah, it does, we won't count your acting positions and stuff, interim. No, I just want to really commend you for taking that responsibility. As you know, it's a lot of work, and the thing that is going to be somewhat unique is that all of a sudden you're dealing with issues way outside the city of Los Angeles, and those boundaries sometimes corral us to where we're looking at our own individual things, but you find out there's life outside of the LA boundaries, and they have a unique and a different system of accounting for funds and budgets than what we have, and so it's a little getting used to, but you will enjoy it. You'll be making, particularly with safety lieu and infrastructure money and the recent Prop R, for the first time they'll actually have real money to spend. So it's a good exposure. Best of luck to you.
Thank you. And maybe we can have, I don't know, I won't be on this side of the table in a couple of months. And I don't know if we could take this microphone. You can't hear me that well, can you, in the back? Yeah, okay. Could you turn it up a little bit? Okay. Rita, is that maybe to have every couple of months just a report on what's happening at the MTA, and as again, since you serve those dual roles, it's hopefully won't be a burden for you, but I think it would be helpful. Okay. Before we approve your recommendation or the nomination, Mr. Arnold Sachs? Mr. Sachs? You here? Okay. He's not here. Okay. Thank you. That's much better on the microphone. Appreciate it. Mr. Parks, and we will move approval of this appointment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to the opportunity, and certainly we'll look to all of you for mentoring, especially you, Mr. Parks, who's been there. And the relationship between the MTA and the department was already mending very, very well before this. So this will just, I hope, help us to just get closer together since we're in this boat together. And we certainly have to support one another in the long term. And it's certainly the best thing I have is just an incredibly dedicated staff that will assist me to get this done. So I appreciate them as well.
Yes. Best of luck.
Can you hear me? No, that's not going to be. I have to yell loud. Okay, Mr. Sachs, we just passed that you were not in the room when we, did you like to say? No, that's fine. Would you like to make your remarks?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Arnold Sachs. I'm just curious. I would hope that with her new appointment to this post, and not in an interim situation, that the new chairperson of the LADOT would have a little bit more chance to check out a few things. I'm still concerned about the authorized taxi cab supervision and the contracts they have at the airport, the fact that it's a nonprofit, and
It's not related to the MTA. This is appointment is to the MTA.
said the LADOT.
She is the general manager of the Department of Transportation. She's being appointed as a member of the
Right,
MTA.
right, but she was appointed as a member last month. She's already been in a meeting, hasn't she?
Well, I think she's been present. She may have sneaked in on us, but this is her
Didn't the mayor
appointment.
announce her appointment for the
He did
last?
announce her appointment, but today is we're approving her appointment today.
Oh, so it's nothing to do with the LADOT then? I'll have to wait then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good thing you approved it, otherwise you would have been
Okay.
fighting the mayor.
All right, so we'll go on to the next item, Madam Clerk. Madam CLA.
Item number 2.
The microphone, maybe it's just my microphone. Yours is working?
Item number 2.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, item number 2 is the Board of Transportation Commissioners relative to the application for the Smart Energy Transport System projected by West Pipelines for a common carrier pipeline franchise to install and operate and maintain a pipeline within the city.
Thank you very much. We will have a presentation on this item, and then we do have cards on both sides, those for and against. We have 12 on each side. What we'd like to ask is when you do come up for brevity, we will have a minute for those that are going to speak at that time. So if you'd like to make a presentation.
Good afternoon. Farhad Zaltash from Department of Transportation. What you have before you is phase 1 of a 2-phase project.
And I know your microphone's not working that well, too, so you might get a little closer. They are, I think they've asked people to come over and try to fix these. Oh, you're here. Okay. So, test this one. Sorry. Testing, testing, testing. That one's still low. This one. And I think those are the speakers here are hard. Here. Okay. Try again.
Good afternoon again. Farhad Zaltash from Department of Transportation. What you have before you is a phase 1 of a 2-phase project for an updated and consolidated way of providing jet fuel to LAX and other airports in the region by a proposed new pipeline system. Phase 1 of the project involves 6.5 miles and only includes cities of Los Angeles and Carson. It proposes a 16-inch pipeline between Wolpack Inland Terminal and Kinder Morgan Watson Station. The Wolpack Inland Terminal is in Wilmington area of the city, and the Watson Station is in city of Carson. Phase 1 also proposes a pump station at the Wolpack terminal, as well as a transfer facility at the Kinder Morgan Watson pump station. Phase 2 of the project, which will come before you at a later date for review and consideration and approval, involves 17.5 miles, and it connects the Kinder Morgan Watson station to the terminal tank at LAX. Phase 2 will involve other jurisdictions, such as Hawthorne, Gardena, County of Los Angeles, LAX, and City of LA. Phase 2 will also proposes a receiving facility at the LAX terminal tank. It should be mentioned that the approval of phase 1 of this project does not, and I repeat, does not predetermine the approval of phase 2. Yes, ma'am, I will. Phase 1 of this project, its approval of the franchise application, does not predetermine the approval of phase 2 of the project. However, the document, the recommendation by the staff, which was approved by the Board of Transportation Commissioners, recommends the certification of the final environmental impact report, which by law was required to look at both phases. So basically, it's a CEQA law that asks the project not to be segmented and look at everything in one document. What you have before you is basically recommendation to certify the final environmental impact report, adopting the statement of findings and overriding consideration for the project, adopting the mitigation monitoring and reporting for the project, as well as approving the franchise application. Again, phase 1 of the project only involves cities of Los Angeles and Carson. I have next to me Ms. Linda Moore from Department of Public Works and Mr. Bruce Lacka, our consultant who was involved in the preparation of the environmental document.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Yes, is there anything you want to add to his presentation before we probably go to public comment?
Farhad pretty much covered what I was going to say. I want to clarify that I'm with the Bureau of Engineering, and my office, on behalf of the Department of Transportation, oversaw the preparation of the EIR and the CEQA process. And in a moment, I'll ask our environmental consultant to briefly summarize the EIR for you. I did want to just clarify 2 points that Farhad covered, because I think these two have been a source of some confusion for a while. Point number 1 is the city's the lead agency for the EIR. And CEQA requires that all other agencies that will be asked to approve some part of the project, to grant any approvals, such as the City of Carson, be consulted in the preparation of the EIR. That's a CEQA requirement. They are considered responsible agencies. And so, in compliance with that, and to make sure that this EIR meets their requirements and satisfies their needs, we consulted with each of these responsible agencies from the beginning, at the beginning of the process, and all the way through till now. Point number 2 is that while the application being considered is only for phase 1, and I want to stress, I know Farhad already said this, the EIR by law has to cover both phases. You can't segment a project. So whether it's components or phases, the EIR evaluates the entire project. And then once the city certifies the EIR, the city will make its decision on phase 1, which is the only application right now, and then any other approvals that are required by other agencies, such as the City of Carson, will use that EIR in making their decision as well. In other words, there won't be another EIR. There won't be another EIR by other cities. There won't be another EIR for phase 2. This EIR will be used for both phases.
Thank you.
And now I would like to ask the city's environmental consultant to briefly summarize the EIR.
Chair, would you like a brief presentation, or would you prefer to just move on to comments?
Which might be helpful, actually, is to hear, there's a lot of people here, and there's some questions you might be able to answer that will be related to your presentation. And so, to many of my colleagues, you want to hear a quick presentation, you want to take the public comment first?
Take the public comment. I just want to ask one question for clarity. When we say that the EIR is for the entire system, but the proposal is only to build phase 1,
Right.
how do we do a EIR for the entire system when we don't know what the potential preferred route and what the impacts are?
The EIR identifies a proposed project in that route, and it also evaluated the alternatives and found there's one alternative route that was evaluated in the same level of detail as the proposed project. And in fact, that turned out to be the environmentally superior alternative. But that's all in phase 2, and there's no application for a franchise for that phase at
Then
this
what you're saying
time.
then is that you, by the EIR, have clearly designated the route. There's just no application to build Phase 2.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
And also, Mr. Parks, the functionality of Phase 1 can sustain on its own if at some point some jurisdiction decides to reject or disapprove Phase 2 of the project.
Great, and thank you for that. If the option is,
It can sustain Phase 1.
can, yeah, it can. That'd be great, and then we'll have some questions afterwards.
Okay,
So we're
very
gonna
good.
call-
Let's-
go ahead. I was going to say, I was going to go ahead and take the public comment.
Oh, you want to do
Yeah.
public comments?
Sorry, yeah.
Very good.
So if you don't mind, we'll have you go to the side, and we will call 4 people up at a time. If you could all, those names that I call up, please sit at the table here. The first 4 would be Eric Brown, Raul Rodriguez, Mike Lansing, and Terry Martin will be our first 4. After that, Joseph Serrato, thank you. Is it Candy or Andy Signs? Andy, I'm sorry, it says Mr. in front of it. Yeah, and Efren Darris will be the next 4, as well as Jaime Hernandez. Thank you. So, okay. Is Mr. Rodriguez here? Yes. You want to come on up, Mr. Rodriguez? Mr. Brown.
Okay, my name is Eric Brown. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff for Councilwoman Janice Hahn, and I'm here today to express our support for this project moving forward. We believe and feel very confident that the Department of Transportation and the Engineering Department has done their due diligence to push this project forward and do a good job. And we've seen that they've done community benefits for our community. This project is going to provide jobs for our community. Therefore, the councilwoman feels very strongly in supporting this project and seeing it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, I am a union member and a resident of Wilmington. I would like to push this project forward and through. It will create more jobs within the area and boost this economy within the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, nice to see you.
Good to see you, too. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Lansing, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the LA Harbor, and I'm here also in support of Westpac's proposed smart energy transportation system. My organization, San Pedro Boys and Girls Club, we merged with the Wilmington Club in 2004. Since then, we've invested $3 million to upgrade the facility, build a teen center, and bring more at-risk youth into the organization. The reality is, with the economy the way it is today, we're seeing more and more of our parents out of jobs and in need of work. This project will definitely provide the parents of the young people we serve with jobs, and we think Westpac will be a great community partner. The City of Wilmington has a lot of infrastructure needs, and this project will only improve one area of that. So I am definitely in support of this project. I hope you will give it strong consideration, and I thank you for the time and consideration of such.
Thank you very much. Before we go to Terry Martin, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to call the next 3 people to take your seats. Joseph, Andy, as well as Efren Darris Jr. and Jaime Hernandez. I'm sorry, Jaime, we'll have you up in a minute. Okay. Terry. This is on Westpac. Go ahead, Terry.
Good afternoon. My name's Terry Martin. I represent the United Association, Local 250, Steam Fitters and Refrigeration, Los Angeles. We support this project, but before I get into my support, I'd like to mention that I was asked by our Secretary-Treasurer of the L.A. Orange County Building Trades, Richard Slauson, who could not be here today, he's in Washington, D.C., to give each and one of you a letter in support. The building trades represents 100,000 workers in the L.A. Orange County area. This pipeline, if approved, would be under a project labor agreement. It's not often enough that we get a customer that will come to labor and say, we would like your support and we guarantee it's going to be local hire. It's going to be your people going to work, and we appreciate that. Now, we have many members here from the building trades that support this project that won't be able to speak, and I'd like them to stand up. With the building trades?
Everybody stand up.
With that, we appreciate your thought, and hope you do approve this Phase 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Joseph?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Parks, and Mr. Alarcon, and members of the staff. Joseph Sirato with the Labor's International Union North America. I'm a member of Wilmington Locals 802. And as you all know, the unemployment rate is something like 12.5%. It's a historical record for our time. We need to move the economy forward. This project is shovel-ready. They're going to hire local people, and we're asking that your committee approve this project. We need to see some leadership moving forward in this city. We've got too many people out of work. We've got teachers now, about 5,000 were laid off or something like that. But you're suffering a big deficit, and that's because a lot of unemployed people can't pay their taxes. They're not able to shop. They're losing some of their homes, as you know. And I think that we need to see some leadership in approving this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Lisa. Thank you. And just before you speak, we'll call up Jaime Hernandez and Andrew Mayorga. Go ahead.
Honorable City Council members, thank you, Commission. My name is Kennedy Saenz. I'm the President and CEO of the South Bay Latino Chamber of Commerce in support of the item before you this afternoon. 11% unemployment rate in LA County does not meet our expectations. We need to get shovel-ready projects in the loop, and this is one of them. We strongly support you that you approve and ask the City Council to ratify and pass this motion, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Efren?
Good afternoon. My name is Efren Darris. I reside in the city of Carson. I'm also a member of the local union, 802 Labor's Union, and I'm here in support of the Westpac pipeline project, which will bring much-needed jobs to not only our local but our community and help boost the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before Jaime speak, we're also, is it Joanne Valle? Joanne Valle? And Dan Hoffman? You come up to the table? Okay, thank you. Whichever one wants to go first. Jaime?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jaime Hernandez. I'm also a laborer out of Local 802 and an E-Board member out of the Wilmington Local. And we strongly support this measure here. And what I'd like to see is I'd like to see the 300 jobs come out for this project, but I would like to see the second phase of it expedited. And we also know that there's another line that's coming from the same harbor to Long Beach. If we could possibly expedite these projects, we really need these 300 jobs for each of these phases. We would really appreciate it in the local area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Mayorga. I'm a member of local union laborers 802. I'm here, of course, to ask your support to approve this project. But what I'm really here to ask you to do is understand that, right now times are tough and our brothers and sisters are losing their homes and they can't feed their family, and it's hard to look at each other every day and realize you don't know who's next. And when we work so hard in training ourselves to prepare to work on these jobs, and people like yourself that hold the power to produce this kind of work or approve it, we really look to your support in times like this, and we really ask that you listen to our voices. You've seen the gentleman behind me stand up, and ladies, earlier, and those are just one of many that are out here that really want to work and they want to feed their family, and please don't ignore us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And before you speak, Alex Pugh, as well as Ben Thompson. Okay, please go ahead, Joanne.
Yes, Joanne Valley, Executive Director of the Harbor City Harbor Gateway Chamber. Our chamber board had unanimously voted to support this project. Not only is that going to bring in many, many jobs and a shot in the arm economically, but also we're looking at a safety factor here. With the technology that has bloomed over the last several years, this technology of this pipeline will be a very safe pipeline, and we feel it would be really an asset to our community, and we hope sincerely that you'll consider this as a viable project. Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director for the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our Chamber of Commerce, we absolutely support this project for really simple, basic reasons. Number one, it's safe. Number two, it provides jobs and a good tax base. And it's efficient. I think, this has been approved by our entire board, and we're asking you to please approve this project and pass it along to our city council for their approval. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Pugh with the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. As you're no doubt aware, LAX is the nation's busiest destination airport, yet it does not have a dedicated jet fuel pipeline to deliver high-quality fuel, and existing infrastructure is not well suited to do so. SETS addresses those infrastructure issues by straightening out kinks and opening bottlenecks, and all of this benefits the reliability, quality, and cost of jet fuel. Last year, the Chamber and LAEDC put together an economic impact study of flights on the Los Angeles region. We found that, one flight operating 365 days a year, international flight, generates as much as $623 million for the local economy. It supports as many as 3,000 jobs, and most of that comes from air cargo, which are businesses that are importing goods to our region. The SETS project will help enable that kind of trade. So we urge you to support this project. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Thompson with Westpac Energy. I'm just going to give a few highlights of the project. As people said, this is a two-phase project. It's for new infrastructure. It delivers a direct route for jet fuel to LAX and increases the efficiency of our system. It's just like a pipeline we built to the San Diego tourist area, where we built that in that area, and there have been no problems. It has not impacted their tourist attractions negatively. It goes right by Petco Park. We want to emphasize this will bring local jobs for the members here to this project. When we selected the route, we minimized the residential areas we went by for the temporary impacts of construction, so we have 9% residential. We've had over 20 community meetings. Construction will be 2 weeks max at any given point. We're happy to do any of the routes in the EIR. And again, this is infrastructure without cost to the taxpayers. So we would appreciate your support on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Thompson, I know if we have additional questions of you as the representative, we'll be able to ask you those as well. Okay. Now we'll go to those that are against the proposal. Carl Henry, Beth Doris, Mitch Lansdell, and Rosalie Preston, if you would all make your way to the... Would like to begin. Would you like to begin?
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Henry, and I'm a resident of Gardena. Let me begin by stating that I am here to speak not against the project itself. I recognize that the project will provide a number of jobs. The only thing that I'm here to speak about is to oppose the route that has been chosen to bring that pipeline down Rosecrans Avenue. I've been informed that there is an alternative route, which is down El Segundo Avenue. If that is the route that would be used, then I would have no objection to the pipeline. So my objection to the pipeline is not to the pipeline itself, but to the route that has been chosen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I probably will have a question of Westpac on that, on the difference between those two routes. Thank you.
Why are you opposed? Because, for one thing, down Rosecrans, the city of Gardena has already planned to add additional services that will run down Rosecrans now. And there's already pipelines in there. So this will be an additional pipeline going down Rosecrans, which will affect the city of Gardena, providing additional services to the citizens of Gardena. And it would appear, the only question that I also have is, since this is a project that is primarily sought by the city of Los Angeles, I still don't understand why the pipeline doesn't run through city of Los Angeles properties. Maybe we could get an understanding as to why it doesn't go down into the city of Los Angeles as opposed to city of Gardena. That might be helpful to us also.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Beth?
I am Beth Doris. I represent the city of Gardena. And to elaborate a little bit on the points raised here, a concern is that the route meanders wildly. It's not the most direct route, and there isn't an alternative that provides a very clear, short, direct route that wouldn't even need to go near Gardena. The fact that the route meanders in Phase 2 in particular is a very big concern. It doesn't need to divert anywhere near Gardena. We've been asking for an alternative that provides a smaller footprint, more direct, less environmentally impacting on the matters, on things that actually mattered in the EIR, where there was a significant and unmitigable impact, and yet we've received absolutely no agreement to do that. We would like to see that. We'd also like to see a feasibility finding. Our concern is that the alternatives are a CEQA function. They serve a CEQA function. Without a feasibility finding, you can't certify the EIR. And to certify the EIR without the feasibility finding, it could be creating a false situation with a bait and switch.
Thank you. Mitch?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mitch Lanzio. I'm the city manager for the city of Gardena. First of all, the city of Gardena is not against the creation of jobs. We all need that at this time. However, Rosecrans Avenue, the primary route, since 1999, we've been trying to underground the utilities. In 2007, Southern California Edison Company led a contract for that construction. First thing they found, first pothole, there were pipes under the ground that were not mapped. Our concern is trying to put this pipeline where we're trying to underground creates additional issues for us in trying to improve our community. The environmentally superior route, El Segundo, would be very much supported by the city of Gardena, and we would hope in certifying the EIR today that if you can't make that finding because it's not before you, that it gives strong indication to the city council, should it come before you, that that would be a supported route. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe if we don't mind, I'm going to call the other names if you wouldn't mind giving up your seat to your next reporters. Yvonne Mallory, Clifton Woods, and Terry Kennedy. Rosalie? Yes.
Rosalie Preston. I'm on the board of the Harbor Gateway North Neighborhood Council. Our community impact statement is on file with you. We are opposed to this project for any route. Both of the proposed projects, the main one and the alternate, would go through our neighborhood. On Earth Day, we ask that you set aside the recommendation of the Board of Transportation Commissioners, which they made on March 12th. The EIR was prepared by a company paid for by Westpac. The decision to have approval of both parts, the decision to approve only one part at this time was made after there was so much opposition to Phase 2. Therefore, at Westpac's request, the project was split into two parts. At the March 12th presentation, it was very, the ability of the opposition to speak was very limited. The presentations were dominated by Bruce Lackow, paid for by Westpac. The rest of us were only allowed a minute to speak. Councilwoman Janice Hahn presented her letter of support at the very end after receiving 3 different contributions for her reelection campaign for Westpac or its agents. Comments on the draft EIR and the final EIR are overwhelmingly against the project. In summary, this is an unnecessary project. All jobs created on this project are short-term. For example, in Phase 1, all the jobs are only for 3 months. There are already 4 existing jet fuel pipelines that serve the LAX fuel depot. We, the residents of the City of Los Angeles, who would be impacted by likely future leaks into our groundwater and other dangers associated with such pipelines, ask that you do not recommend this project to the full City Council.
Thank you. Yvonne, Clifton, then Terry Kennedy, and Henry King Sr.
My name is Yvonne Mallory, and I am the Economic Development Manager for the City of Gardena. I want to state for the record that I support totally job creation. My opposition that I wish to express deals with the failure of the EIR to define and spell out how the Westpac project plans to mitigate the multiple issues that impact the communities along the proposed alternate routes selected. Water, air, and several contaminated sites overseen by the LA Regional Water Quality Board have not been addressed by the EIR. For 2 years, the blatant ignoring of these issues means that little foresight and planning has been given as to how the health and safety of these communities along the alternate routes will be impacted. Failure of these issues to be addressed in the current EIR means that the CEQA requirements have not been completed, they do not comply, and therefore the EIR should not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Woods?
Yeah, my name is Clifton Woods, and I want to state I'm not against the project. I am against it coming through Gardena because we have plans ourselves to do underground work, and if Westpac is allowed to proceed down Rosecrans, the city of Gardena cannot do its project. So we applaud the project, but not through the city of Gardena. Move it up to El Segundo Boulevard, and we go away.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Kennedy and Mr. King, and then if we could call Lou Watson and Levon King up as well.
I noticed that on your agenda here, it talks about the little summaries that talk about to install, operate, and maintain a pipeline within the city. What city? Why would you be coming through our city? This map here shows one of the proposed routes from Vermont to Crenshaw, right down Rosecrans. Rosecrans is our city, Gardena. Most of the people in Gardena, and I believe the city council, is against this. So I don't know that you've done any groundwork at all to get support from our city. And we are fearful that there will be explosions possibly or leaks, and who's going to pay for that? This is your project, City of Los Angeles. You keep it. We don't want it. We do not want this project down through our city. Please don't do it. Don't act like a Goliath to these small cities around here. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Mr. King.
My name is Henry D. King Sr., and I live near El Segundo Boulevard. And in that area, we have many abandoned or either closed down oil wells and many underground pipes as well. So if this were to go down El Segundo Boulevard, I'm afraid that it would interrupt some of the pipes that are already there and would be detrimental to our water system as well as to the environmental health of the people in that community.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. King. Lou Watson and Levon King, and then Stephen Box and Arnold Sachs.
Lou Watson speaking. First of all, the El Segundo route is a very, very dangerous route. I live in the community of Athens on the Hill. We are sitting on a methane gas field that had an explosion in 2005. We keep bringing that up, and we have it in our documentation already. It's very, very dangerous along the El Segundo corridor. And we are in support of jobs for all able-bodied individuals. However, not at the expense of the health, safety, and quality of life of the residents and stakeholders of Gardena, Harbor Gateway North Neighborhood Council, and the community of Athens on the Hill. We already have our objections, our written objections on file and our documentation and our backup as to what actually happened in 2005 with the explosion in our community. And I find it incredible that Mr. Thompson stated that the pipeline is a direct route to LAX. He keeps coming up with these incredible statements, and he just made one again today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. King, and if Mr. Box and Mr. Sachs would like to take a seat, please.
Okay, my name is Levon King, and I live in the Athens and, sorry. Okay. I live in the Athens on the Hill area, and if I could indulge the commission, I have some information I'd like to share. Basically, we, in agreement, we are not against job opportunities. We are disagree with the route. If you can see, when you get this, you'll see on the map, I've outlined our area, our community. I've put X's where there's some major oil derricks and wells. These are just a few of them that's visible. The circled area is the part that goes over the freeway. It's right at, I mean, you can just see the close proximity of what we already have going on in our neighborhood. It's a heavily populated area of about 500 residents. There are two major parks in that immediate area, not to mention further along the El Segundo corridor. There's a major golf course and whatever, where there's a lot of activity going on. What this does not also show are how close the schools are to this area. There are a lot of families, there are a lot of children in this area, and it's not going to be a safe alternative.
Thank you. Mr. Box.
Stephen Box, I live in Hollywood. Happy Earth Day. What a strange day to present this proposal. First of all, I'd like to say I stand or sit before you in support of the Harbor Gateway North Neighborhood Council. They're my good friends, and I've spent some time with the Harbor Gateway North and the Harbor Gateway South Neighborhood Councils, and so I'd like to support them in their endeavor to ask you for your to refuse this particular proposal. The second thing is that in this particular area of the city, I was surprised when I started spending time there to see how many recreational cyclists and equestrians there are out and about in that area. One would think that a proposal of this significance would come before the Bicycle Advisory Committee, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or the Equestrian Advisory Committee, which we now have. And especially because these particular routes oftentimes take some of the same property that's favored by those that are trying to get away from the traffic, like the equestrians and the cyclists. So, thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs.
Thank you. Arnold Sachs, it's good to see all these people from Gardena come out in opposition of this pipeline. My concerns are, A, the franchise fee that'll be charged. Will be another $500 franchise fee? And if so, how come the franchise fees aren't visited? And we've heard a lot of people say how they're not against jobs. It's the mantra of the day. But there was a person who spoke earlier who said the project would take 2 weeks to construct. So that's really that's a drop in the bucket when it comes to jobs. It's jobs, but 2 weeks. And then there's been some problems in Torrance also with a pipeline. There was some construction along Vermont Avenue. They wanted to do some houses. And the fallout from the pipelines that were in that area has created quite a hazard. So in retrospect, it was a bad decision to put the houses there. I'm not sure if that would interfere with it, but I'm glad to hear the people from Gardena come up and step up to the plate and not approve this, ask for not to have this project approved through their city.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. If we could have staff come back to the table, please. I have a couple of questions and issues that were raised as well from the comments that were made. Could you describe for us the various routes? And I've looked at the maps where there were different choices and why, and it was alluded to a little bit by the Westpac representative, but and particularly the Rosecrans versus El Segundo. site or location. I know that one of the, what I'd been told, one of the considerations was the least number of residential areas in which you would go through. So if you could address the issue of the Rosecrans versus El Segundo. Also, the issue of the size of the pipeline and the other proposed underground utilities in Gardena, whether or not there are existing pipelines that go through some of those areas, and how that would impact that. I'm sorry, and the last thing I'm just throw out on my question is the feasibility findings that were alluded to by the legal representative from the city of Gardena, and whether or not certifying an EIR without having feasibility findings, and I'm not sure where that fits in to the certification of that. So those would be my questions.
Okay. Let's see. What I can do is, for some reason, in the moment, cannot put my finger on the graphics that show the alternative routes. So perhaps what I can tell you what the intent was behind the selection of the alternative routes. As my understanding is that the route was selected to try to minimize the length of the pipeline in front of what would be considered sensitive land uses, residences, parks, hospitals, educational facilities, child care facilities. And what the alternatives do is that they were identified and selected for the purpose of trying to reduce and minimize the extent to which it runs in front of sensitive land uses. So the basis for the identification of the alternatives was not necessarily in response to any particular environmental impact, but solely a land use-based choice.
Okay. Would Westpac want to add to that at all as to the selection of this?
The route was selected to minimize the residential areas, the temporary impacts of construction on residential areas. After the construction is done, there will be no notice that it's there. But we tried to minimize those areas. And going through the LA basin, as you can appreciate, it's pretty well built up. And so the...
Go ahead.
That wasn't me. So we actually looked at a number of different areas. This was the best route that we found. We found down Rosecrans. After suggestions from the community, we looked at El Segundo Boulevard as well. And the impacts were a little bit less, which is why in the EIR, I think, and these people are the experts in the EIR, it's why it's designated as the environmentally preferred route.
I'm sorry, which is the preferred route?
I believe...
Well, as the council members, I've been before these folks on many occasions, so I know how familiar you are with EIRs. What the EIR does is, of the alternatives that have been identifies which of those alternatives is the environmentally superior alternative, and of those, the El Segundo route was selected. The EIR, as you're familiar with, does not make choices between a project and its alternatives. That's a role for the decision makers to make, not for the EIR to make.
So for the residents that spoke today, the representatives from the city of Gardena, some of them said, I'm not all of them, but said they would rather have it go through on El Segundo than Rosecrans, right? If I have that correctly? So the EIR states that's the preferred route.
It is the preferred route of the alternatives that were analyzed.
Of the alternatives that were analyzed. Okay, sorry. That was what I
And
had.
CEQA doesn't make that
Right.
connection to connect alternatives with the project.
And this is in phase 2
That's
of the
correct.
project. So is there a possibility if ongoing, again, we're only approving we're approving the whole EIR, including those that are alternative routes, so that is there a possibility as you go forward in looking at phase 2 to potentially, how dramatic is it to change it from from Rosecrans to El Segundo?
We have said that we are quite happy to use any of the routes that are in the EIR.
I understand that. But how different does it make it without having the map in front of me, choosing between El Segundo and Rosecrans? How does that, I mean, I saw some of the versions that, one was a kind of a triangle look as you, or the two sides of a triangle. Others, went different ways. So how different does it make it in that route?
I think that the El Segundo Boulevard is perhaps a mile north of Rosecrans, so that is the primary difference. It goes a little bit further north.
But how does it change the rest of the route?
It doesn't. A little bit on just before that, and a little bit just after that, but for most of the route, it does not change it.
Does not change it.
Correct.
Okay. So it is an alternative that you can consider in Phase 2 going on El Segundo, and would not dramatically affect the part that is in the city of Los Angeles or the other areas. That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, and with the Rosecrans, some of the concerns was that in Rosecrans itself, they're burying utilities, they have other lines, other pipes. Have we at all looked at that and possibly appreciate what they're saying, and therefore look at the El Segundo Road?
Yes, we have looked at that, and actually, we did a little bit of preliminary substructure research on Rosecrans, and we found two things. One, that based on the work that we've done, that there is room for the pipeline. But two, there are already about 12 or 15 pipelines in the street now. So when it's clear that the existing pipelines have not hurt the development of this area because, they're already there. But again, based on our research, there appears to be room in the street both for our project and for Edison's project. Now, this is preliminary, but that's where our research has shown.
Will you go before the Gardena Council and lay it all out? And give
Absolutely.
Appreciation?
Absolutely. And
today, if we approve it, we're not approving the particular route yet. It's just all the routes are in it. The EIR will help us determine it, and then you'll be back again describing where you might end up going. So all the Gardena people might be listened to at the same time, all of us who would like to see this project go forward.
In Phase 2, we'll be going back before every jurisdiction through which we seek to route the pipeline, which means, again, the City of Los Angeles as well as Gardena and Hoffman. So we have to go through all those jurisdictions and talk to them.
Okay. Thank you. I know I want to ask my colleagues if the feasibility findings. Can anyone respond to that?
It's an interesting. Linda, do you want to take it? While I've been writing EIRs for 25 years, and I think I've written EIRs in all of your districts at this point, the phraseology that was chosen is a little bit unique and not one that I'm really familiar with. But to try to interpret what it means in the context of CEQA, I would take it in the CEQA talks about feasibility of two things. It talks about feasibility of mitigation measures, and it talks about feasibility of alternatives. Okay. What we had done with the mitigation measures, of course, all the mitigation measures that have been identified in the document have been determined from an environmental perspective to be feasible and are, of course, being recommended for incorporation into the project, in addition to the conditions of approval that each of the line departments may also add to the project. With regard to the alternatives, in addition to the three alternatives that are in the document, the two that we've been discussing, as well as the CEQA required no project alternative, there's another aspect of the CEQA regulations that come into play with regard to the feasibility, and that is the CEQA guidelines require that an EIR also identify alternatives that were considered but deemed infeasible, and that the EIR need only analyze in further detail those alternatives that are deemed feasible. And deemed feasible is, one, it must meet most of the basic objectives of the project, and two, it should seek to avoid or reduce the significant impacts of the project. So the three alternatives that may pass through the screen meet that feasibility finding. So from the EIR's perspective, they have equal value in terms of ultimate selection in terms of approvals. In terms of other alternatives that we looked at, but we deemed them to be infeasible, included upgrading the existing jet fuel pipeline system that runs through the South Bay, selecting an alignment that crosses more of the South Bay, kind of does a straight line between Wilmington and LAX, We also looked at placing the pipeline within existing utility or infrastructure corridors, things as, how about put the pipeline along the Alameda corridor or put it along railroad corridors. We also looked at, what if you just forget about a pipeline? What if you just transport the jet fuel by truck? We also looked at even going so far as to establishing a marine terminal in Santa Monica Bay, to where you can just go straight from that terminal right to the Lax Fuel Farms project. So we looked at all of those possibilities for the project. We also looked at other alternatives through commentary on the draft EIR. So we've evaluated what would certainly meet the CEQA test of a reasonable range of alternatives, and so that the alternatives that are analyzed, in my opinion, meet the feasibility tests of CEQA as well as the feasibility tests of the mitigation measures.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Mr. Alarcon? Mr. Alarcon, you have any questions? Mr. Park?
Yeah, let me just ask, just for clarity, although many people have spoken about street names and such, our maps are not really clear enough to determine which are there in color. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us.
Use my younger eye to
Yeah.
show you.
Okay. Yeah.
Tease you on that. They didn't get that when I said it.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, sorry, he's right. This
Yep.
map is better. This one, this is Rosecrans, and that's Escondido.
Oh, okay.
That's Rosecrans.
all right. All right. We got a color.
That other map is not as good.
Yeah, color code. Let me just go over a couple of questions that were asked in the sense, how long again will this construction go on for phase one?
Construction for Phase 1 will take 5 months. Where the confusion was that I said any given point along the pipeline route, because we move quickly in construction, will be impacted for 2 weeks.
Okay, so the community impacted for 2 weeks, the overall project is 5 months.
Yes, yes.
The other issue that was asked about number of jobs and the length of the jobs, is the expectation that people will be there for the entire 5-month period? Are they going to be brought in shifts to work a portion of it, or how does that work? Why don't you come up to the mic?
Come to the mic, state your name for the record, please.
Sorry, Mr. Jensen is the construction expert.
My name is Tom Jensen. I'm with Westpac Energy. For about 4 to 4.5 months, it'll be the full crews laying the pipeline out, and then the last part of it will be commissioning of the pipeline.
So 4 to 4.5 months is, and what is the total number of people that we expect to be working?
I believe it's in the range of 250 to 300 jobs.
Okay, could you just explain one thing that was confused? When we're saying that phase one basically is a standalone, right? And there's no guarantee that phase two will be constructed.
The phase one goes from the Vopak area up to the Kinder Morgan Watson station. The Kinder Morgan Watson station is the main hub for distribution of refined petroleum products through the southwest United States. So Kinder Morgan Watson delivers jet fuel to Ontario Airport, to San Diego Airport, to Las Vegas Airport, to Phoenix Airport, throughout the whole southwest region. That's why it's a standalone, and it fits into that as well.
So is the expectation with phase one that phase two will never occur if you're already hooked up to a station, or how does phase two come into it?
I believe phase two comes into it at the time that the airline consortium decides that they want to proceed with the project that we discussed with them back 2 years ago.
Okay, but currently they're getting service by phase one hooking into a station.
They're getting serviced by 4 pipelines, existing pipeline systems from and from the area down where we're at by Vopak. It goes through multiple tanks and multiple pipelines to get to LAX. Our system is a direct route into that, which is part of the efficiency that we were talking about.
But the efficiency that you're looking for doesn't come about by just building phase one. You're saying you have to build phase two to get that efficiency?
To LAX.
to LAX?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the Phase 2 is, unlike what was said earlier, it appears it's going to happen. It's just that you haven't put forth the paperwork to request it, or what?
It's a question on when the customers decide they want to proceed with it.
Okay. There was a couple of things brought up where...
Let the guy that knows all the commercial stuff talk.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry, sir. In terms of Phase 1 versus Phase 2, Phase 1 is standalone. We do get efficiency on that part of the project by itself. In order to obtain the efficiency going to LAX, that's when Phase 2 comes in. And as Mr. Jensen said, we anticipate that will be in 3 or 4 years when conditions improve for the airlines and when some of their existing agreements expire.
Then go back and explain to me, with Phase 1, where it's planned to stop, and it's standalone, so it hooks into a station, what is it servicing when it's completed?
It services moving jet fuel from the airline's existing storage in Wilmington to the distribution point for jet fuel and indeed all fuel throughout the Southwest. Right now, that portion of the system that exists is bottlenecked. And so that means that at times they're not able to get in the amount of fuel they want, which means that you have really extreme price spikes that cost the airlines and us consumers money.
So they're getting service now, it's just that it's delayed and not the quantity that they're looking for. Phase 2 would give them a more direct and a sole purpose line only to LAX.
The continuation of the project from Phase 1 to Phase 2 would extend to LAX. So yes, it would give just jet fuel to LAX.
Okay, so it will not be like the station that services multiple locations, direct line.
Correct. Phase 2 will just be to LAX.
Okay. Then someone in one of the speakers mentioned the issue of going through Gardena, that it impacts their city's work plan for projects. Has that been looked into?
Yes, sir, it has. It has not been looked into conclusively, but I would make 2 points. One is that in response to the City of Gardena's assertions, we did some substructure research on our own and found, as I said, 2 things. One, based on our preliminary look at things, and again, it's not conclusive, we believe there is room in the street for both our project as well as Southern California Edison's. That will be conclusively determined when we talk in depth with Southern California Edison. But second, we found that there are already like there are in most of our streets in Southern California, a lot of pipelines there already. So there is no impact on the commercial aspect of things.
Okay. But the issue is that if you've talked this out with the officials of Gardena?
We have discussed it with them, and the party that we really need to discuss it with in depth is Southern California Edison.
Okay. When is that going to happen?
After we get to Phase 2. But again, we have alternate routes that are identified in the EIR to give us an alternative.
Okay, could you comment also, one of the speakers talked about the concern about the line going under a park or at a park and the potential harm?
The line will go by a park, but again, the impacts will only be for 2 weeks during the construction. As it is in San Diego, once the line is in, no one knows that it's there, so it will not disrupt anything after it's
2 weeks is while you're constructing it, but the line will be ever present, and I think the question they brought up was whether there's added danger with the line next to a park that currently doesn't exist.
Well, the current technology on pipelines is such that it is very rare the pipelines that are built with current technology have problems. So can you say that there is absolutely no issue? There's an issue with all of us driving down the street. But to the extent that there is a pipeline there, it has a relatively non-volatile fuel such as jet fuel. It is a pipeline.
Okay, now let me ask my last question then. Are there additional mitigations because of the park?
I'm not sure. I don't know about that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, if I can maybe add a thought or two to maybe help bring some additional light to the issue. there are very extensive sets of state and federal regulations that highly regulate pipeline construction and pipeline operations. We're not dealing with a subject matter of which the resource is one that's mildly or even moderately regulated. We're dealing with a resource that's extremely regulated. And on top of that, where there are potentials for the uncovering of contaminated soils during construction, though there are mitigation measures that are identified in the IR to address any of the potential risk of upset conditions that could occur. There is also 24-hour, 24/7, 365 monitoring of the pipeline, the pressure in the pipeline, such that if there is any change in the pressure in the pipeline will be automatically shut off in order to minimize any adverse potential effects from a spill in the very unusual or an unanticipated event of a break in the line. So there are redundancies built into the project. There are many operations and maintenance manuals and guidance that will be followed. So I think that it would be appropriate to take away from the discussion that there are many protections put in place to protect residents, park users, the health care, educational facilities, protecting the kids, protecting the old folks, protecting folks who are sick, and protecting the residents of all the cities that the pipeline goes through, whether it be Los Angeles or Gardena or any of the others.
Spoken like a true engineer. The issue I think that they're concerned about is they don't want to be the first time that's ever happened. So the issue is, are there other mitigations that you can, with all of the technology and all of the requirements, all of the issues of where it's regulated, are there other mitigations that can be brought on board that will ease their tension and their concern?
Okay. At this point, whatever all of the feasible mitigations that have been that we have identified or others have identified have been evaluated and incorporated into the project as appropriate. So if there are some additional measures that folks are thinking about that would have a beneficial effect upon it, we would, as always, we request that they bring that forward through the CEQA process or through the public hearing process in order to allow an evaluation of the appropriateness of the incorporation of those measures. But at this time, up to this point, all we've heard is just generalized concern. Gee, we're concerned about this pipeline going by us. But we've identified what we feel is an appropriate set of mitigation measures to protect public health and welfare.
Okay, this is my real last question. I think the dilemma is that asking regular people that live next to the park to come up with what they think are the mitigations, I don't know if that's reasonable. They are not experts. They're not engineers. The issue is what you're asking us to do is validate a process and saying that all of the guidelines are in place. And what I would like to make sure is that it's not incumbent on the residents to figure out if it's deficient. We have to have some assurance that the construction people and the EIR are going to ensure that it is mitigated to the highest level so that we don't have the oops later.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. What I can assure you is that the burden of responsibility for identifying potential measures falls squarely on city staff and, by extension, myself and my organization. So we've looked at the issue. Obviously, whenever you have a pipeline, public health, safety, and welfare is utmost. And what we feel is what is on the table now, that the conjunction of the regulatory guidance and the supplemental mitigation measures that are available, that are incorporated into the EIR, provide an adequate safety margin for the public.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Rosendahl? Okay. The item is now before us, item number 3, which is item number 2, which would, Mr. Rosendahl, you want to move approval?
So moved.
And we will, is that, I vote consensus on that?
Yeah.
I vote.
I would just like to add a couple of instructions, that we move it in approval, but ask that we get a report back that, as this project goes forward, to verify that the issue with Southern California Edison and Gardena have been resolved, and that there's an assurance that alleged work will not go undone. And the other one is that we are, as we move forward, assure that all the mitigations, particularly around parks, schools, and places of congregation, are at the highest level.
Thank you. So that would be approving the item that is before us. Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for all of your thoughts. Our next item.
Item number 4 is a Cardenas Groom motion relative to a report on current policies and procedures for the maintenance of the bike walking path along the Metro Orange Line.
Okay. If we could, I know you're all, we are continuing with the meeting. Shh. We do have to move on to the next item on the agenda. If I could have the department representatives.
Okay.
I know we have, I think the city attorney's office is represented here as well, or the LAPD.
I just want to
Captain.
thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Captain.
Drive carefully.
Those of you that might be in the overflow room know that there are now open seats here in this room. Okay. And Tamar, we welcome you at the table if you'd like to. Okay. All right. Please, who wants to make start the presentation? I mean, colleagues, this is a motion that Mr. Cardenas put forward, and I seconded. A majority of it's in his district, but some portion of it is in my district as well. There had been several articles in the paper and concern as well about the maintenance of the Orange Line. Specifically between Balboa and Hazeltine, but the current policies and procedures, I think I was surprised to learn that DOT had a responsibility for part of it, and some knowing exactly who's responsible for what, and how we're going to address some of the increased, I think, individuals who are living in there and some of the other problems that we've had. So who's going to start?
I guess I will. My name is Mike Wano. I'm with the Department of Transportation. We're responsible for the operations and maintenance of the bike path. We have a contractor that does maintenance of the bike path. The problems that we've been having are with, I guess, homeless people sleeping in or residing in the landscaping, and that has caused some issues of legal issues, I guess, and authority issues. Typically, Bureau of Street Services has a process where they cite and notify people that are occupying public property. They post a notice and they tell them that they need to vacate within a certain amount of time, and then if that doesn't happen, I guess LAPD is called in and they remove the people, and then Street Services and the Bureau of Sanitation remove whatever material is left behind. The problem with the bike path is that we are using it's Metro property, and so there's some confusion about whether Street Services has the authority to utilize their normal process for the Metro property. We've been working with CD6, and we've arranged a meeting with City Attorney's Office, Bureau of Street Services, to work this out, and CD6 to work this out. There are people in the City Attorney's Office that believe that we do have the authority, and Street Services believes that we do not have the authority.
Do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay. Captain?
I have really nothing to add except that this is an important issue for the police department, because if we don't decide or determine who actually is responsible for the cleanup along this area, it does very negatively impact the police department, and it becomes a police problem with all the transients, and they are starting to come back, that's true, but I've been down along the bike path, and it's all environmental. You know, if we could keep the place cleaned up and keep the bushes trimmed, there would not be a place for these people to make their home. So it does impact us, and we're anxious to see who has responsibility.
And so Metro staff, LAPD, city attorney, DOT have all gotten together on this? I mean, have there?
Not Metro staff. My name is Paul Mishkin with DOT. We're meeting with BSS, DOT, LAPD, and city attorney's office.
Okay.
And as far as DOT is concerned, we are maintaining we have a contractor on board who maintains the bike path continuously. He has a crew running back and forth every day on the site. So the site is maintained, but the problem of the homeless encampment, the contractor cannot remove them. They report to us, but we cannot remove it. It's up to BSS to go through the process of removing the homeless from the site.
The point, I think, is, and Mr. Cardenas and staff may want to come up as well. I mean, I think the point is that no one knew who was responsible, and there were areas which weren't being maintained. And so if DOT is responsible, or their contractor is, and it's not being maintained, then we need to go on the contractor. If it is an issue that the contractor has not been reporting, and I'll let Tamar did come up to the table, see? You inspired her to. I think we want to know what's the protocol on how to deal with this, because this will not be the first or the last time that we're going to have to deal with this. The good news is we have a great bike path and a great area in a metro, but the problem is this is a maintenance issue.
The maintenance issue was as a result of our negotiations to try and have the path maintained by Rec and Parks. The estimate that we got from them was rather high, and so we went to contract on it.
Okay. And all I want, I don't know, again, Mr. Cardenas' office, I want to come up here and say something, so if you want to come on up. I mean, I think I want to know, and I'm sure this is also where Mr. Cardenas was going, which was, who's responsible for maintaining it? If, when they maintain it, they find there is a homeless encampment or other areas, who do they report to be able to manage that? And who then is held accountable in that chain of events, so that the public knows who to call and the rest of the people. So I'll let, Tamar, did you want to add something?
Sure. Tamar Gallatin. I'm a deputy city attorney. I'm the neighborhood prosecutor for Van Nuys Division. We have actually had the meeting already, or a meeting already, with Bureau of Street Services and DOT and LAPD and the council offices, and that's really where we're stuck right now, is over whose responsibility it is to remove bulky items or to post and clean up a homeless encampment in the foliage adjacent to the orange line. It's Bureau of Street Services' opinion that they were not responsible for it, that it was DOT's, and it was DOT's understanding that that was Bureau of Street Services, and that's kind of where we're stuck right now. And we're talking big stuff, mattresses, stoves, that type of thing, that the DOT landscape contractor really can't clean up because they neither have the equipment to do so, and they don't really know the policies that the city follows for cleaning up an encampment. And street services.
So is it the recommendation of the city attorney's office that street services be the responsible entity if the contractor calls and says there's a homeless encampment that includes a mattress and a couch and people living there?
I can't talk on behalf of the civil side of our office and what they're going to recommend, but on behalf of the criminal side who's trying to clean this up, we need somebody from the city to figure out whose responsibility it is to clean that up. And we just need that issue clarified, which city agency is responsible for that.
And maybe Mr. Cardenas' office would like to come up and say something, Frank, sorry.
Officer, I'd like you to stay too. I want to ask you a question.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Frank Bonos. I'm the field deputy for CD6. You pretty much hit the nail on the head, I guess I say. We're trying to figure out who's responsible, who's going to be in charge of actually getting everybody that's living in the foliage. We're having deep issues. I was contacted by the community, I say, about 3 months ago on this issue. from further and having meetings and trying to figure out who this belongs to, it's become one of those issues, it's not mine, it's yours. So I guess we're down to where we're at right now, and as you mentioned it, where do we go from here? So it's basically it where we're at.
And the question I have is, who has currently the authority to remove those bulky items is under street services? If this was not part of the Metro Orange Line, right? Wouldn't it be street services?
If they were in charge of maintenance, yes.
Well, not charge of maintenance, but if there's a homeless encampment.
Currently, our contractor does remove the bulky items from the site, mattresses, the stove, whatever. The contractor has removed it before, and the contractor that we have, they will remove it, but they cannot remove the homeless themselves.
Okay, so maybe not necessarily. So who is responsible when there are homeless individuals that are there and trying to deal with the issue?
From my understanding, I believe it was street services, and if they couldn't get anybody out, they went over to police department, correct?
Well, the police department doesn't have responsibility for moving the large items. It's always been my understanding that was street services. I mean, we will assist them for any, criminal issues that are, security issues, those types of things, but we don't do the removal.
Yeah. See, I'm sensing the
Is that
yeah. Okay. So I think this is the first time we're hearing this item, but I think it should be easy enough to say either DOT has the ability to do it and it's in their maintenance contract, or it's
to remove their large items.
Remove the large items. We need a process that if those large items include a actual homeless encampment, which will involve city attorney, LAPD, and Bureau of Street Services, then there's a process whereby that occurs, and everyone gets in the room to go and do their piece of that pie. But right now, from the public's perspective, I'm not going to go out and remove it. And if that's what you want me to do, I'll take that responsibility. But someone has to take the responsibility to do that. So,
I also want to clarify something. On DOT, is it just maintenance, or is it also for bulky items? What's the contract have right now?
The contractor can remove the bulky items, can maintain the bike path, and remove the graffiti. They can do that. But they cannot physically remove the homeless person from the site.
Correct.
They cannot do that.
and there's certain legal issues relative
Right.
to encampments that we've dealt with on other places other than this. So we know we have to deal with that. So, but I think what it's not only the homeless encampments that have been a problem, it's also the maintenance, that our maintenance, whoever we've contracted with, hasn't been doing the best job either.
What I was trying to explain earlier was that the maintenance contractor got started late because of our need to go to contract rather than to have Rec and Parks do the work for
Understand that.
us.
So when did the contract
And so
start?
what happened was, he started late. The landscaping had been overgrown. He started at one end and started working his way across.
So in the essence of time, because we have a lot of people who've been here for a couple hours, when did the maintenance contract start and they start doing maintenance?
The contract was for 6 months. It started August of last year. And the contract expired February of this year. Then we are extending his contract until June 1st. We are working on an RFP to issue a new contract, a long-term contract for 5 years.
Okay, so...
But the contractor is on the job up to June 1st now.
Wait. So you're saying there's no contractor between now and June 1st?
It is. The contractor is on the job until June 1st. His contract will expire at June 1st.
Okay, and do we have...
We are working to extend his contract for 2 more months until we get a long-term contract. We have issued an RFP for.
Because they've been contracted for 9 months, and the problems have been also within the last 9 months. It's not like it just created yesterday. So I think or was a year ago, it was in the last 9 months.
Yeah, it's been catch-up with them. They've been moving along down the bike path, and so the last places they got to were the places that we had problems. So, department's responsible for the maintenance, and I think the only issue that's outstanding is whether street services can do the notification if it's an encampment.
Isn't that their responsibility today, if it's an encampment that's not anywhere else in the city?
It's not clear. They say that because it's not in public right-of-way, city right-of-way, because it's in Metro's right-of-way, they don't have the authority. That's my understanding. And so we're going to meet later this week or early next week to work this out. There are differing opinions. My understanding is there are differing opinions in the city attorney's office.
we've heard from at least one person that says they believe that Bureau of Street Services does have the authority to do this, and so we need to sit down and work this out.
Okay. And why did we agree in the, this is kind of a Bernard question, but why is it not MTA's responsibility?
From what I understand, that is the city property of the bike path, or it's a certain section south.
We leased it. It's my understanding we leased it from the county. Isn't the bike path a leased area?
Metro owns this right-of-way. A long time ago, we were going to build a bike path along the right-of-way. They decided they were going to put the orange line in. They both went in together. They still maintain the right-of-way. We have an easement with them to use their right-of-way for the bike path, but we need to maintain the bike path.
So we agreed
Yes.
to maintain this area?
Yes.
We, the city.
Has
Okay.
anybody talked to LASA, the homeless agency between the county and the city on this issue?
Yeah. She's saying they did.
You did. Question, officer, how many folks are we talking about have you been dealing with that have been camping along the way?
It's under 10. I mean, there's not that, at the moment, we're not talking about that many because it actually did get better for a period of time, but now we're starting to see the foliage start to grow back and we're starting to see them starting to store their items again in the bushes and so on and so forth. I have personnel whose job it is to go along there as part of their regular duty, and we try to flush it out as much as we can, but we are seeing an erosion
When you
starting
see
to
the
occur.
folks living there and camping there, what do you do?
Well, typically, it's my bike unit that goes in. They know them, and if they have an outstanding warrant or something, they just went out there today with a handful of warrants for people that they've seen in and along that area. They were going to go out and do a sweep and pick them up and, take the property away and do what we can with that. And then we get the senior lead involved to go back and work with the other city departments to clear up the area. It hasn't been a huge problem in the last few months.
Is anybody hooked into social services or any of that to connect these people to services?
That's all part of the process.
I've actually sent out some people to try to reach out to the homeless and get them off the street. It's just one of those things where it's very difficult to get that possible. So if I could add something else, our section in our district is, this kind of began from Sepulveda to Hazeltine, and actually hit the paper. That one section was overlooked by maintenance, and this is what I've heard when we had our meetings. And since it was overlooked, this is where the encampment started. Everywhere else was not an issue. So it seems to me that since this area wasn't kept up, it was very accessible for everybody. I'm hearing a lot that also not only the homeless, but I'm getting some day laborers in there. There are barbecuing, sleeping, well not barbecuing, but cooking and overnighting and whatnot. So it's at one point we did get our representatives or our people to get out there to clean up, but it's coming back full force once again. So we need to, step up forward a little quicker and try to resolve this.
If I could just add, I think the issue of maintenance, if we deal with this issue of ongoing maintenance, the other end of this on how to deal with getting rid of the homeless encampments will be moot, because it really is environmentally, as it gets worse, then they come to it. If it stays cleaned up and maintained well, as soon as we see it, all cleared up, they're gone. There's other places that they go. So, if we could just establish whose responsibility is to maintain it to some acceptable level, I think it would be a non-issue with the homeless.
It also seems like it's the maintenance is very overwhelmed and not able to keep up. That's the sense I'm getting. I'm trying to understand.
Well, our contractor is there, and he has 2 crews on both sides of the bike path, and he's going back and forth every day. And he has his crews there. So we have our staff go out there once or twice a month, or at least we went out there last week, and we check everything. We notify the contractor of anything that needs maintenance. The staff was happy from the work the
I
contractor has done
understand
so
that,
far.
but the reason that, and I don't know exactly why the reason, but there was an article in the paper that talked about it wasn't maintained.
It was in February,
We
yes.
cannot say to the public that we have not, that we've maintained it. So we may be doing it now, which is great, but there was some problem where it existed so that we had to deal with it, and whatever that reason was, but we look bad in that. What I'd love to do, colleagues, and you have some questions, but is to ask, we have a meeting in 2 weeks, Claire? Is that correct, Maria? We hopefully, Mr. Parks, please let us have a transportation meeting in 2 weeks. Okay. We have budget, so we're hoping to have a meeting in 2 weeks at some point. Is between now and then that the city attorney, the councilman's office, DOT, MTA, LAPD, street services, get together and have a protocol. And if you all can't decide, we'll decide for you.
Wait a minute. If we have an easement, it's simply our responsibility. Why the MTA?
I'm sorry?
Why do we have to involve the MTA?
Well, one, because I think not only the sheriff's department is part of the, enforcement on that side, there are other things that MTA
But if
participates
we have an
in.
easement, we are responsible to maintain.
I'm not saying the MTA is responsible, but I think they should be part of the meeting. I think.
They do get the overwhelming of homeless into their section, and then.
Yeah.
We've met with the MTA, with LASD, and we've met with them to make sure that we understood who was responsible for what, and they made it clear. We're on this side and they're on that side. But we do have
We
an
should
ongoing,
coordinate with them. I don't-
we do have an ongoing
I don't
liaison
think
with
there's a
them.
problem on, outside of the easement.
Well, as you get so many homeless people, they do go on to their section basically, and I've seen them cite them and whatnot. But they actually enforce quite well and able to take care of their area, so it doesn't.
Okay, I just want to make it very clear that, look, we take responsibility for what's ours. If we have an easement, we are legally responsible to maintain that, and it's not the MTA. So just, and I agree with the coordination aspect.
Yeah, coordination, that's all.
But
We're
let's
not,
be very
you know,
clear.
responsible.
This is the city's responsibility, not the MTA's. Or they, frankly, they'll take the easement back.
Probably shouldn't have ever agreed to have them. Do you have a question, Mr. Parks?
I was just wondering, because one of the things that I think causes the public to wonder about us is that we have these lines, our people show up, clean the bike path or the area, the fence. Trash may be on the other side that's in the right-of-way, and we leave it there, and then they come and clean the right-of-way and leave trash on these. It seems as though, and I don't know if this is the answer, but at some point in time, whoever's doing the maintenance for both, if we were part of the same contract that cleaned the whole thing.
That was our first plan, Councilman.
Yeah.
We asked Metro if we could pay to have their contractor maintain both theirs and ours, and they said no. I mean, it seemed really obvious to me, too.
Rita, you're a board member now. Okay.
What was the reason for no? I mean, they got to go to the same thing, they just got to.
There is a fence separating the bike path from the busway. They wanted to work on their side of the fence.
Yeah, it's kind of like the thing when we do with bulky items and people put them on the curb and we pick up the couch and leave the TV. I mean, and people wonder, do we know what we're doing?
Yeah.
I mean, so it just seems as though we may need to reemphasize that MTA relationship, unless there's some specific reason why the same contractor is getting paid, why they can't clean on each side of the fence. It just doesn't make any sense. So we can get with MTA and go back and revisit that.
So we have 2 public comment cards. So we may have questions, but we'll let the other public comment. Stephen Box and Arnold Sachs.
Go first.
Hey, Stephen Box, I live in Hollywood. I rode we're down at 1 minute already? I rode the orange line on Saturday. I assure you we have a very significant problem. It was designed poorly in the first place. You've got a bike path with a fence, and then a wall, and then a lot of shrubs. It's the last place on earth a reasonable person at dark would ride their bike. The lights don't come on until well after dark. I called the police because I found a body. I think that we shouldn't condition the people of L.A. to ignore bodies. It turned out the person was passed out, but when I called the police, dispatch says call the sheriff. It's not true. Captain Jordan will assure us that there's an MOU between LASD and LAPD. I finally flagged down by writing out to Van Nuys, a sergeant who assured me it's a sheriff's department issue. So regardless of what people tell you, the brutal reality is the photos I posted today. I tried to send them to Patricia to get them to you in time, but it is not maintained. It is so poorly maintained that there's areas that have never been gotten to. In other words, you can see the debris line and the dirt line come out into the path 1 foot off the yellow center line. And the reason people live there is there's 2 liquor stores. Use the abatement program to close the liquor stores. The reason people live there is because it's designed poorly. We can trim it. It's neatly trimmed. But you need to cut down the trees and the bushes which provide the habitat. That's why people live there. So going after the homeless people isn't the problem. It's so poorly designed and maintained and supervised that if the watch commander or the supervisor that night doesn't even think it's his responsibility, the bike patrol in the daytime aren't addressing the problem, it's at nighttime.
Thank you. And so they'll come back and report in 2 weeks. Mr. Sachs.
Thank you, Arnold Sachs. From this discussion, you think that you might want to have a policy because there's future transit lines planned in the city and the county of L.A. There's the Crenshaw line, that may be a busway. There's the Expo line, that's going to be a railway. There should be some kind of program in store for both of those lines and any other transit lines so that you're not having this discussion. It seems to me that MTA, in deference to Councilman Alarcon, is a transit agency, yet they're using the issuance of an easement as a hostage, a way to hold the city hostage. If they're the transit agency, that encompasses rail, vehicle, bus, and bicycle. They should make a plan that includes a bikeway. Then they'd be responsible. That's the protocol for a transit agency. If they had done it in the first place, they'd be responsible. If they're going to do it in the Expo line, they'll be responsible. On the Green Line, they're responsible. Although there's no bikeway, it's a good idea maybe to consider one there.
Thank you, Mr.
Just
Sachs.
the fact that they hold the city's hostage by issuing an easement should be looked into.
Thank you. So, colleagues, unless there's disagreement, we'll have a report back in 2 weeks on the site. Thank you. Thank you.
Brings us to item number 5, which is a DOT report relative.
We'll come to that item last. We'll go with the taxi cab items now.
Item number 6 is a DOT report in response to a Google Garcetti Perry motion relative to a review and status of green clean air vehicles for Los Angeles taxi cab fleets.
Good afternoon, council members. Amir Sabadi, Assistant General Manager, joined by Tom Drischler, our Taxi Cab Administrator and Acting Bureau Chief. This is an informational item coming back to you basically on a lot of work and information that has been provided on the Green Taxi Initiative here in Los Angeles. Approximately 3 months ago, the Taxi Commission created a subcommittee just on the green taxi initiatives, and there was a series of reports that were provided as informational item to the green taxi subcommittee of the Taxi Commission. Basically, the concept is obviously we the department and the city wants to make sure that there's alternative fuel options, less dependence on foreign oil, and reducing the smog and carbon footprint here in Los Angeles. And obviously, we want to make sure we do it, the right way. And there are a lot of information in your handout, so I'm not going to take the time to go through that. It's been a long meeting. But basically, we are still working with the commission, Taxi Commission, the mayor's office, on providing what the green components shall be of a program. As you all know, we're also going through a refranchising, and that refranchising process has begun. The department has issued the RFP for a consultant to look at the whole refranchising and health issues with taxi drivers, as well as the green initiative to be looked at as part of that consulting work. So we had provided you a timeline, I believe, in a separate report on that, and where we are today, we're maybe about a month maybe a few weeks away from awarding that consulting study, again, that looks at a lot of different issues, and the green initiatives is going to be a part of that as well. So I just wanted to let this committee know that there has been a lot of work been done, a lot of it has been researched, a lot of it has been looking at some other cities, learning from other programs, and we're here to answer any questions. And at this point, this is just an informational item for you.
And Will the green efforts, I know there's a green taxi committee as part of the commission that's looking at this. Will the consultants' contracts include looking at some of these things as part of the franchise?
Yeah, we definitely put in a part of the scope, and I think what we have discussed internally is that part of the task force can be moved up independent of other task force that they're doing, so that we can still move much faster in trying to look at all the different components of a green taxi. But again, you have to put it in the context of what the future is going to look like. If we are going to have a refranchising, is it going to be the same? The consultant is going to also look at a medallion system, that we're going to look at possibly a hybrid system. So there's a lot of uncertainty as far as what exactly is going to happen in the next year and a half. But we just need to be considerate of that. I know some cities around us, Manhattan Beach was one of the newer agencies that recently adopted a mandate for their taxis using a miles per gallon. So there are some lessons learned out there, and we are definitely looking at some of that with staff, but the consultant will go in more depth, I think, and look at those programs. But this is a process that's work in progress. We have to include the stakeholders, such as the industry, such as the drivers. There's cost benefits. There's a lot of different initiatives that needs to be looked at as a whole before we decide what would be, I think, the best approach for us.
And I know one of the issues we may hear from the taxi cab drivers and companies is if you go to CNG, where are the fueling sites and the feasibility here in Los Angeles, particularly with how they go around and how to deal with that issue. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Both those are kind of on the table. The hybrids, of course, have their pros and cons. The clean fuels have their pros and cons, and so there's cost, there is the economy currently, it's the availability of vehicles. So there's a lot of different factors that goes into, I think, an ultimate decision before we, try to mandate such a program. We do have our current program with, as we stated, the franchise was given back 2000. So at that time, for that contract, we did have some programs, and I think all the franchisees have met those milestones as far as that, through the years, just vehicles by themselves have gotten cleaner and better mileage and have able to reduce the smog on those vehicles. So that's just something else to keep in mind.
But we are in now the 9th year of the franchise, and there are all the companies are actually exceeding what the standards were, but those were standards set in the year 2000. So obviously, in terms of clean vehicles, you want to move the goalposts at this point in time. But when we do the refranchising, there can certainly be newer and better standards. But between now and then, the Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners can come up with incentives to get cleaner fuel vehicles out there sooner. I did want to mention also that the board is going to be asked to approve allowing a Bell Cab company to put 3 hybrid cabs into place. They've requested to do that. They need an exemption from the size rule for the size of the vehicles, because these are going to be Toyota Prius vehicles. But we have a couple of representatives from Bell Cab here today, but we're very pleased that they're the first company to step forward, and we'll actually have hybrids in use in the city of L.A.
Great. Great, colleagues, we have some speaker cards.
How large is our fleet?
2,303.
It's a great project. I mean, I'm excited about when you come back in. And I hope that all the taxi cab groups and individuals are engaged with you so that they all feel part of the development of this company.
Yes.
If I could call up the 4 speakers, the first 4. Bill Rouse, Melissa Adamu, Netanyahu Galassi, and David Shapiro, and then it'll be followed by Hamid Khan and Arnold Sachs. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. William Rouse, I represent Yellow Cab and United Checker Cab as the general manager. I am also the vice president of the Taxi Cab Livery and Paratransit Association. It's our international taxi cab trade association. I am not here in that capacity except to tell you that I also sit on the vehicle committee, which is charged with researching the issue of green taxis and presenting a paper on green taxis. And I am one of the authors of that paper which is forthcoming. I just wanted to tell you about the experience that we've seen across the country and across Canada, and to let you know that it's a very mixed bag. You have some operators that are clearly happy with hybrid and CNG technology. Other operators in New York, perhaps, and others, where they sued to block the technology, and the experience has been decidedly negative. I believe that technology is improving, and we're probably a couple years away from having a really viable hybrid taxi cab. We do understand the public policy in favor of moving to green vehicles, but what we would ask the council to keep in mind at all times is that greening the vehicles costs a lot of money and brings absolutely no revenue. There will be not one single extra taxi cab trip, and so this is a cost on our driver owners. And these are times when our call counts are down. Nevertheless, we have made a proposal to the department and to the mayor's office in January, and that would green the taxi cab fleet. We stand by this proposal. It's modeled on the Manhattan Beach, Torrance, and Long Beach models that several of us have been involved in, and so. But that proposal does require that the city allow us enough time to amortize the vehicles. We are here to work with the city, work with the council, work with the mayor's office and the department to make this thing happen.
Thank you. And you've shared that proposal with DOT, or did that? Yes. Okay. Because I'm not sure DOT if I've seen that proposal that came from Ms.
I'll be happy to provide you with it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Malise?
Good afternoon, Mallas Adamu from United Independent Taxi. Green cars, yes, it's important for the city, important for the environment, but one of the problems that we have is, number one, the vehicles are too small to handle. Number two is the economy. Right now, with this economy, it's very difficult. It's going to be burden to the owner-operators to spend $35,000 on these vehicles and to get back all the money in short time. It's going to be very difficult. The technology is probably 5-6 years, and also they don't have large vehicles for this kind of technology. So if we keep it for 2-3 years, another technology will come, probably all electric, so it might be helpful for the city of Los Angeles and for the drivers also. Thank you.
Thank you. Sanya.
Hi, my name is
Excuse me, Sanya, just before you stop it for just a second. And we could ask Hamid and Arnold Sachs to come up, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Ntayo Selassie. I'm from Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. The proposal Mr. Rouse was talking about is let's keep going, doing what we have been doing all these years, and it's not acceptable for the drivers. We really work hard to stop it, and it's really bad thing. Don't look at us. Don't investigate what we did in the past. Let's keep stealing from the drivers. So that is really unacceptable. What we need is greening is supported. As a driver, we drive 12 hours a day. We are inhaling the fumes, and we know how it is. We like to have green, but as today everybody was saying, we're shovel ready. We need subsidy. And we just buy American cars, and it stimulates the economy. We need support on that. And with that, we need a medallion for individual drivers. And then they can, additional money, they can borrow from a bank, and it would be, alleviates poverty also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Shapiro.
Good afternoon, David Shapiro. I'm the founder of the United Independent Taxi Drivers and a current board member, and I was the leader of the movement of taxi drivers 32 years ago to break through the monopoly. I want to remind members of the committee that the spirits and the dignity of cab drivers are always with you. They are the ones who pay for the system. when your staff talks about the industry, you'll notice they separate the drivers from their language. And indeed they should, because the lobbying occurs in a very powerful way from the yellow cabs, and it's rich. And so you must always bear in mind the important fact that the taxi drivers pay for everything the industry proposes. And so I'm going to ask you in the months ahead to think of how you can, as the Obama administration has done with other industries, bring money to the drivers who are going to have to pay for this and subsidize or at least back low-cost loans. There isn't a responsible driver in the world who doesn't want to help you clean the air.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Before Hamid begins, Martin, also followed by Mike, Madami, and Josef. Actually, we'll just have two, Mike and Josef will have to hold on one second. I called up Martin as well.
Martin.
Oh, Martin, I'm sorry. Martin and Mike. Mike? Mike? Okay, thank you. Hamid. Yes, sorry, today we just, because of all the items, I apologize. Here, if you could be, they'll make sure they do it so you don't.
Thank you all very much, council members. It's a pleasure speaking to you today on a critical issue. What you have in front of you is a proposal that the companies, which you are not aware of, was trying to create a backroom deal with the city. Historically speaking, Councilmember Gruhl, you had put this motion to really clean up this industry and bring a consultant in because of financial corruption, which has been called modern-day sharecropping. And it's really critical then we look at that LACPA supports the 21st century green taxi system that promotes living wage jobs for drivers and protects the environment. But a true green taxi system should go beyond just green vehicles by strategically integrating taxis into the vision that you all have for this city. One of the key factors is that when you look at that proposal, the drivers were never even asked who's going to pay for this thing. Okay? The thing is that they're asking for an automatic renewal of the franchise until 2015. And you're not even aware of that's what's going on. So fortunately, I think there was enough sense prevailed that was stopped, but yet at the same time, this is what we are dealing with, and this is your leadership had put forward, that how do you clean up a system that is so deeply corrupted, where regardless of what you have to say, they will try and keep on bringing lobbyists, as David Shapiro says, to silence our voices. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sachs.
Yeah, thank you, Arnold Sachs.
Just so you know, I mean, part of what we want to do is have this part of the franchise,
Right.
and to look at some of the options that they've done, the clean truck program down in the port, which are their potentially are loan opportunities for people who are able to do that, and looking at voluntary and those that are mandatory.
And I think it's really becomes a cost issue that we're looking at, that who's going to
Right. Who's going to pay for it? Yeah. It's always about the money, isn't it, Mr. Parks? Sorry, as we begin our budget. Mr.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Sachs.
Well, addressing the money issue, the Harbor Department provides $20,000 for every clean vehicle that's being put into the harbor. Is there some kind of program that can be looked into to assist the taxi cab drivers? I mean,
That's what we're talking about today, is what are the various options and them coming forward with that.
That being said, part of the problem is the franchise fee the city pays or collects from the cabs, and then the licensing. There was an article in the newspaper about a driver who said that the seals can cost anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000. How is that differential, that gap, created? And who owns the seals? When you figure that out, then you figure out who owns the car and who's responsible for the payment. But then I'd also like to address when the LADOT staff talked about the facilitator to review the franchise. The new franchise. I'd like to know that they are looking into the letter that was received from one of the drivers from the Internal Revenue Service that was dated from January 11, 2007, and was heard before the Taxi Cab Commission in April of 21st.
I ask you to conclude, because that really is not the item before us. We're here on the green tax.
But no, the gentleman said that they were going to look into certain standards for the franchises.
That's as part of the franchise agreement.
Okay,
This is
so
great. So if I
one of
could
the-
ask you to conclude, you're past your minute as well.
First speaker won't pass. I'll finish up with two sentences.
That's why I'm letting you finish. Please go, finish your comment.
Thank you. The IRS ruled that the taxi drivers are employees of the cab company. Is it the city's position to not follow the IRS rulings? That's what they need to look into.
Thank you. Before we go to Martin, Yosef, as well as Jose Luis.
Good afternoon, I'm Martin Shatak, I'm from San Gabriel Transit City Cab. I was one of the co-signers of that industry proposal submitted to LA Mayor's office, and for your information, 6 operators out of 7 signed that proposal, meaning 6 company managers signed for 1,900 Los Angeles licensed taxi cab owners out of 2,300 total. And to me, it's not a backroom deal, it's an open and official deal, and we're just trying to green the city, and we're just trying to make it better for our drivers. As a matter of fact, in the proposal which you have it in your hands, thanks to Hamid Khan, we are actually offering a green cab package, which is including compressed natural gas vehicles, propane converted vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and also smaller vehicles providing 30 miles per gallon or more. So we are working constructively, we're trying to accomplish something for drivers, and we already have a plan ready to go. And once the city agrees with our proposal, we have that plan in place, and we can start implementing them for the next day. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. In LA Times today, there's an article regarding Congresswoman...
Record,
Pardon me?
your name for the record.
Mike Madani from the Los Angeles Taxi Cab Drivers Union, IWW. Okay, there is news in the LA Times today that there is Representative Jaime Hernandez, Democrat of Venice, by the Department of Justice, been investigated regarding corruption. We have the same problem with the taxi system. Franchise system is corrupted, and you can't do anything to fix it. It's not fixable. You got to replace it by medallion system, which is a better system, gives a better protection for the drivers, and is a better service for the public. And comparing with the expenses for franchise and fixing franchise, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be less money for the city, and drivers going to be getting involved directly. Because companies are middle of the taxi drivers, which they're doing the job in the city. We don't want that anymore. Taxi drivers, they don't want that anymore. We want to replace the system, medallion system. 2005, we gave a proposal to Councilmember Garcetti regarding this medallion system, which is one cab, one driver, and the green cab. If you go back then and read that proposal, that clearly shows what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph? Joseph? Is that the right way to pronounce your name?
I'm Joseph Budvarhay. I would like Mr. Mike Madani talk to on my behalf because of my condition.
What is your case? Okay, Joseph had a case, he had an accident at the Horn lot on 12th of February. He was driving a cab from Nelly, owner at the Checker Cab Company. Number one, Nelly owns a lot of cabs. She owns more than the regulations of DOT allows. Second of all, she's been harassing him all the time and asking him to pay for the accident. Actually, the accident which happened, he wasn't guilty of it because he was sitting waiting at the booth, and another Checker cab, which that one belongs to Nelly as well, came and hit him. So his case is very important because he's a cab driver for a long time. He's an honest cab driver, and Nelly and Checker Cab Company, they just pressuring him to pay for the accident, which is not lawful. Thank you.
Jose Luis. Thank you.
My name is Jose Luis Orellana from the Taxi Drivers Association, and what I'd like to say is that I think that many of you have seen the movie called The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. And after watching that movie, it's kind of hard not to understand that there is a problem with global warming. But in reality, timing is everything in life. And I think that right now, according to a survey we done among the drivers that own the cabs, they say time is not right, for us to come up with this money. Where are we going to get $35,000 for a hybrid? Where is the financing coming from? I mean, does the city have the money? As far as I'm concerned, the city needs about $40 million to balance their budget. The state of California needs like another 40 billion. So where is the money going to come from? Another idea that is coming around among the owner-operators is like, well, why don't we change the system to a medallion system, where I own my cab, and I have the title to that, and I can take it to the bank and ask for a loan, so that I can comply with the so-called green alternative. If it is within your power to change that, to where I can have a medallion, and I can take it to the bank and say, here's my medallion, I want to make a loan to buy me a new car. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A lot of these issues will be dealt with as we go forward with the RFP and the study by the consultant that should be coming forward soon on that item. When do you think would be a good time to have at least a report back, Mayor, on this item?
Report back on the green taxi or report back on
Green
the...
taxi. And maybe it's part of when you come back with the RFP.
The RFP will be sooner because obviously we have to award the contract, so that would be in early May. I'm not sure if we'll have all the information that early, so I would say, council member, maybe 60 days, 30, probably 60 days would probably
At
be.
least be able to provide an update, at least verbally, about what's happened since today and the time we go out with the consultant.
Yeah,
I think that
we'll
would be
provide an
helpful.
update.
And then maybe that, as we're looking at, it is with the new president, there are a lot of opportunities for funding. And look at Jim Clark from the mayor's office of, you sat through a lot of this today, so you've learned a lot more about taxes than you may have wanted to know before. But, Jim, maybe we can also look at where there are funding sources to be able to help green our taxi cabs and whether or not there's some synergy there with some of the things proposed by the federal government. Okay. All right, so we're going to continue this for 60 days then, but we'll get the verbal report next. Next item, I know colleagues, we do have, we're backed up a little bit on your schedules too, but we'll try to get through these next couple of items as quickly as we can. All right, next item.
Next item is reports from DOT and the Board of Transportation Commissioners relative to the annual evaluation of the Bandit Taxi Cab Enforcement Program.
Tom Driscoll, Department of Transportation. I'm joined today by some colleagues from LAPD.
How are you?
Lieutenant Ron Catona from Emergency Operations Division.
Officer Lorena Ruiz from Emergency Operations Division.
In 2006, the council approved the Bandit Taxi Enforcement Program, and the program is an independently funded operation. Well, the council approved two ordinances, one to just tweak the flag drop fee when they activate the meter in a cab, so the cab drivers get 20 extra cents per trip, and then in exchange for that, there's another ordinance that collects $1 a day per cab as an assessment for, we call it the Bandit Assessment, and that raises about $810,000 to $820,000 a year, and we have a memorandum of agreement with the LAPD where they can use up to $750,000 of that for overtime operations, and the remaining overtime funds is used by LADOT for our investigators. And this program has led to an unprecedented number of bandit arrests, where we had over 1,400 total last year. In previous years, the most we'd ever done in a year was 400. Great. And also, effective in January this year, we are doing impounds in all cases because we got some legislation passed last year, and so we're doing 30-day impounds, and now LAPD and DOT is working very closely together, and between the two of us, we think that we're having a pretty good impact. One of the things we have seen, though, is that more people are kind of getting into the bandit business now with the downturn of the economy. We've even seen entrepreneurs coming online on Craigslist to advertise as taxi cabs, and we've been making some arrests of those folks and educating them. But we think that the program is going well. We're making progress. There is no action required of the council this time, unless you wanted to amend the program.
Aren't we being asked that we adopt the money, authorize the transfer?
Yeah, there are a lot of recommendations, DOT report, to transfer the money and continue the program.
So there is action that we're taking today that transfers the dollars?
Yes.
Okay. Does not
Yes.
have a report on that.
That's the technical aspect.
That's
That's
technical.
right, yes.
The money part, okay, the important.
The
Would you
point
like
is
to add,
the
and
money
I,
is there.
as some of my colleagues know, I went out, although it's been a while, I should do this again, to go out with some of the LAPD officers undercover in collecting and identifying those individuals that are bandit cabs. Are we seeing a little bit of an increase based on economics? I mean, I would assume some people who have lost their jobs or others are going to say, I could just be a taxi driver, and because what amazed me is most of these people have no sign, they don't look like a taxi cab. They're Honda Civics and Ford Explorers, and which was eye-opening to me in that experience when I went out. But anything you would like to add about what you're seeing or success of the program?
Well, as Tom had mentioned, I think it's unprecedented that we've made so many arrests. We worked together jointly on this operation, and actually, we were anticipating when we started the impounds this year that the arrests would go down, but in fact, actually, the arrests have gone up. It's been more difficult for us to make the arrests because obviously the suspects out there that are engaged in this activity know we're out there, and they know that they're going to get their car impounded for 30 days. But again, as Tom mentioned, because of the economics, I guess, of what's going on nowadays, people are still going out there and trying to do this. I mean, we have folks that are driving around with 4-year-old kids in the car, picking up fares and stuff like that. But as it stands right now, we've already surpassed our year-to-date numbers from last year. I mean, last year we made 281 arrests by the end of April, and so far right now we still have 2 or 3 details to run. We've made 334 arrests.
Just in this year alone.
Just since January to April 23rd.
In the 1,427, that I think the figure was 30% resulted in a 30-day impound because the drivers had no driver's license or a warrant.
Correct.
And I think that's the message we have to send out there, although for economic reasons people may do this, but for the people getting in the cars, you don't know who you're getting in the car with versus those that are part of the franchise that exists.
Correct.
We do have some public comment cards, and colleagues, I don't know if you have any specific questions, but we can have them come back. Are you ready to hear the public comment? Mr. Parks, are you fine on the public comment cards? Mr. No? Okay.
It's just great.
Very good, good.
Applaud you, that we had an idea here, we ran through it, worked on it, and to come back with a report like that.
It's very nice.
Grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we ask you just to vacate for a moment, we'll call back Melise, Tamaray, Netanyahu, and David Shapiro.
Good afternoon again. The bandit enforcement officers are really doing good, but it's really too little for the job of the city of Los Angeles. 8 officers are arresting 1,400, impounding 1,400 cars is not enough. Because right now, if you go to Venice Beach, there are bandit taxis everywhere. If you go to Sunset and Alvarado, there are bandit taxis everywhere. LAPD with 8 officers, it cannot be accomplished. I think the city has to find from general fund or from stimulus package to enhance, to add more officers on this program so that we will have more business for the city, more revenue for the city, because if we increase taxes, they are going to pay the city their franchise fees. In addition to that, all these bandit taxis, if they create accidents, the city is going to pay anyway. So it's better to add some money for this program. It's not going to be only enough, this 20 cents per trip. Thank you.
Thank you. Tamaray.
Yes. Good afternoon, members. I am a senior cab driver, which I did this job almost over 20 years. And I always drive a cab. I want to be a cab driver for the rest of my life. I enjoy doing this business. I love my customers. I'm doing it again for the next 20 years, as long as God give me whatever it is. So anyway, recently really, and during your time, at your watch, this bandit issue completely increased. I would say by 500%, I'm telling you. I work at nighttime, especially Venice Beach. Mr. Rosendale, on Air Bikini, I can tell you, Nikki's, the other room, James Beach Cafe, Canals, Beachwood, all this bar is occupied by the Bandit. The Bandit has a line. They have a whole lot somewhere in Santa Monica. And not only that, they come to pick up those people, the valet parking by themselves. The valet parking, call those cabs a Bandit and put those people, I mean, imagine about 110-pound girls, throw them inside drunk and a Bandit that no one knows what kind of person this guy is, and take those people, and then whatever happens, we're going to be blamed. Which me, that I drive a cab for a long time, I never had a handcuff on my hand. I have never had a ticket from a DOT. I have never even had an accident, and I will be blamed for those things. They taken our business. They give us a bad name. Imagine from Hollywood to Santa Monica, it cost about $80 with each Bandit. From Santa Monica to airport, it costs $200 with the tourists, $100, those kind of things. Do you think those people, the customers, they're going to take a cab back again? So it's not going to happen. You have to do something else. I don't think the officers, I'm not saying they're not doing any job, but they are not doing what has to be done. Maybe they don't have, the way to eliminate those things, maybe awareness of it, whatever it is, so really it's increased by 500% the Bandit.
Okay.
So you have to do something. That's why I come up here to tell you about this issue.
Thank you. Amir, could you, I don't know what, the officers left and your staff left that are responsible for taxi cabs? Okay. Could you ask them? I don't know if they're outside.
By the way...
So, Mr. Shapiro and Netanyahu, and also if we could ask Arnold Sachs and Martin to come up. Thank you.
Okay. This is another ordinance which is all handled pro forma, which taxi cab ordinances are, which shows that the taxi drivers are simply not seen to in L.A. forever. The franchise lobbying is it. For you to tax the drivers twice, we pay our taxes, we pay our fees. What other industry has to pay the PD extra out of the driver's pockets, of all things? 20 cents off the meter each trip. But us, it's amazing. Why shouldn't L.A., when I talked to the lieutenant out in the hall after the commission meeting, he's not really concentrated on bandits. Only at the last commission meeting did they appoint this young officer to concentrate on bandits. And it's not effective. And so I would say that since the drivers can't afford a dime, we shouldn't do this. And you should be conscious of the Yellow Pages advertising, the phone booth advertising, the Korean hotels, all by bandits, and they have companies, very solid companies everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. My name is Ntayo Selassie from Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. About this bandit issue, I've been speaking for a long time.
Mr. Sachs, are you ready to come up?
It looks like I'm getting deaf ear a lot of places. The problem is solvable. It's easy. We have West Hollywood in front right here. Every sheriff enforces the law. Santa Monica, no bandits work over there. If you're scared to drive around, even talk to customers, because the police will be on top of us. Orange County, they put you in jail right away, every police. In Los Angeles, it just looks like, at least they were telling us the truth long time ago, oh, this is Los Angeles, is the culture, bandit is the culture, we're not going to do anything about it. At least that's the truth. But now, they bring 4 police, to do what? Right here in Hilton Checker, downtown, there are bandits in the name of TCP, and Holiday Inn lined up, 10 of them. We cannot even do anything about it. The drivers have gave up. If there is a convention, they're going to boycott those hotels you hear from them, that's what they told me. They're waiting for BD time, they're not going to serve those hotels. Maybe DOT will come then to harass the drivers. We've been begging them to solve it. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs, followed
Yes,
by
thank you,
Martin,
Arnold
followed by
Sachs.
Jose Luis.
One of the things I'd like to know about with the bandit enforcement that occurred in one of the meetings was companies that are licensed in L.A. but don't have a seal that maybe operate in West Hollywood and come into the city. Would those cabs also be impounded based on this January 1st new ordinance that was put into effect? Because the company itself has a franchise with the city, but not all their cabs are sealed. Number two, there was discussion here with problems that people with trips, bandit cabs overcharging. I would highly recommend that the LADOT put some passengers at the airport and make requests to go on short distances and long distances, and not just look for bandit cabs or cabs operating illegally, because one of the worst places where trips are overcharged is at LAX, and most of the people that serve LAX are licensed cab drivers in LA.
Thank you. Martin, and then Jose. Is Jose Luis?
Thank you. Martin Shatakian again from San Gabriel Transit City Cab. The number of 1,400 arrests of bandit operators in 1 year is very impressive, and I have to say that both LAPD and LADOT are doing a marvelous job. However, if we divide $750,000 on the number of these arrests, we can see the figure somewhere about $550, which industry pays per arrest of every bandit driver. And bandit drivers are getting away with $200, $250 penalties. This 30 days impound of the bandit vehicles is a good thing, but guess what? These bandit operators are not even waiting for their vehicle to be released after 1 month from the impounder. They simply go and buy another retired taxi cab for $500, and next day they're on the road again. And I repeat this probably a couple of times on the Taxi Cab Commission. My proposition is, unless we start taking away these bandit taxi cab vehicles permanently from bandit taxi cab operators and not to sell them in any public auctions, and unless we start imposing progressive penalties on these bandit operators, this problem will not be solved. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jose Luis Orellana from the Taxi Drivers Association, and the point that I'd like to make is that in the city of West Hollywood, the sheriff department enforces the taxi cab regulation. In the city of Santa Monica, the police department enforces taxi cab regulation. In Beverly Hills, the police department and the parking enforcement enforce the taxi cab regulation. But in the city of Los Angeles, I work mostly at night, I have seen officers flagging a bandit cab and giving them a passenger. I think that it should be very important for the police department or from this committee to address this issue, tell this police officer or tell the commanding officer or the whole police department, and look, you need to enforce these laws. The police department goes after the guy selling hot dogs at the corner. The police department goes after the guy selling CDs. The police department goes after the guy selling purses, belts, and whatever that happens to be at a corner. How come the police department doesn't enforce the law in regards to a bandit cab that is so easily seen? It should be part of the educational program. Believe me, I do appreciate the work that they do, but it's not enough. I mean, how many efforts do they have out there working? The whole police department should be enforcing the rules.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the last speaker on this item. I think what we'd like to see is adopt the report. I think some various issues have been brought up regarding enforcement in certain areas, Abbott Kinney and the Venice area, as well as ensuring that the entire LAPD is aware of what the bandit taxis are. I know we have a special unit, but ways in which if we can look at if there's other additional services that we can provide, other models that may be out there. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I'd just like if you heard kind of some of the issues that were brought up today to look at some of those.
In regards to the area around Abbott Kinney, this is part of a larger problem we have in general with the city of Santa Monica that has licensed over 500 cabs for a city of about 90,000 people, 95,000. They have unlimited permitting, and they're in a process of revamping their entire approach to taxi cab regulation. But the problem is they've licensed so many cabs that they just don't have the business in the city of Santa Monica, so they habitually come into the Venice area, the Abbott Kinney area, Pacific Palisades, West LA, and on weekends you'll see them all over Hollywood. And we've made many, many arrests over the years, probably over 500 arrests in the last 10 years of just Santa Monica cabs.
I think if that's we need to work with the city of Santa Monica, and we need to, again, for those areas that enforce.
We're helping them out the best we can with
Okay, well, what I need from you, though, is to say, here are, Wendy, call the the city manager of Santa Monica. Here are the problems that they have created, what we need to do, because it sounds like in that area it's a big problem, as I'm assuming it is in Hollywood. It's it may be West Hollywood that it is, but I think we have to focus on those areas because our cab drivers are being impacted by it.
Also, a number of years ago, we shared a training bulletin with LAPD on franchise and bandit taxi cabs, and perhaps it might be a good time to revisit reissuing the bulletin and making sure it gets out throughout LAPD, but that would be up to you.
Sure, we could do that.
Well, particularly in areas, again, West LA division that's looking at Venice, or the Hollywood division, to do a special even half-hour training about who these people are can be helpful if they're out there on the street, because they do things. They stop people who, we had this problem with bicycles, and, they do other things, and this is a real serious crime that we're looking at for people who are operating without a franchise.
And there's just one other aspect I want to comment on, is that there are what we call TCP bandits. That is to say, limousine operators, town car operators that get a license from the Public Utilities Commission, and they're basically operating like taxi cabs, taking a walk-up business. They have arrangements with doormen and folks at nightclubs, so that they get business that's not prearranged the way it's supposed to be. And we have an ordinance that is pending that will authorize DOT and LAPD to inspect waybills of these operators, and also make it a lot easier for us to prosecute them for operating like taxi.
Pending, it hasn't been adopted. Do you know what the holdup is?
I don't believe we've received it from the commission.
It's been, right, it was approved, it was recommended and approved by the commission, and I believe it's still in the mayor's office.
Yeah. The clerk does not have it. It's not before the committee right now, but it is coming.
Okay.
But that will help us prosecute these bandit town car operators.
We don't know if it's held up anywhere unless you tell us.
Yeah.
We assume it's moving. So unless you tell us, then we can't push buttons to make it move. So we need to know that if it's not moving.
We expect it to move forward.
Okay.
Soon.
Jim, I know you're the rep from the mayor's office. Maybe you can check in on that for us. Thank you.
A couple of things regarding the TCPs. As it stands right now, when we come upon a cab driver who's operating illegally that's a TCP, we more or less give them a pass, let them go. So until we get something like this in place, basically that's how it's been. And we desperately need that to actually enforce this on TCPs, because quite a few cab drivers go out and get their TCPs, and because they know that we're not going to be able to do anything with them. The other thing, too, that I'm not sure that everyone understands is that just because there's a marked cab driving down the street that doesn't have a permit seal on it, that's not breaking the law. It's not that simple. I mean, our operations consist of a detail with undercover officers and uniformed officers, and we have to determine with the use of the undercover officers what the intent of the driver is before we can make an arrest. And so, a uniformed officer seeing a marked cab without a permit seal driving down Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, that doesn't constitute a violation, and there's nothing really they can do about that.
Unless you see them pull over, though, and try to pick up
Correct.
a client.
But again, that's unless they're following the cab, the chances of them seeing that are going to be almost zero.
Well, what we'll do is adopt, because we need to move the money over to make this operation, adopt that report and kind of keep tabs and let us know when there's things that aren't moving that we need to push to help, implement that.
Well, I would like to point out also that if we're impounding everyone involved in an arrest. If a cab is a second unit of an existing company and it doesn't have a seal, that still gets impounded.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ready to move on that, colleagues? You okay? No, thank you. You're not.
No, you covered it.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is DOT reports in response to a Han Rosendahl motion relative to amending the municipal code and the parking of taxis in residential areas.
Okay, we're back. Amir Sadati with Tom Drischler, and this report is per the request of the Transportation Committee coming back with the additional information and research of really looking at other cities and the possibility of a permit program. As we had discussed earlier, taxi cabs or commercial vehicles are restricted in parking in residential districts, and in our earlier report, we provided that in the past 3 years, we've only had 705 parking citations issued, roughly 0.15 citation per taxi in the city. And also, I think both the city attorney and our office advised that this would possibly could lead to a precedent setting, because now you're taking a section or a group of vehicles that provide a service, and you wanted to allow them to park in residential districts. So we looked at some other practices in other cities, San Gabriel, Burbank, West Hollywood, San Diego, El Monte, Monterey Park, Glendale, Downey, Cerritos, Pasadena, Culver City, and Menlo Park. And we did not find any of those cities specifically changing their codes to allow taxi cabs to park in their residential areas. San Diego did have a de facto taxi cab residential parking, in that there was no code addressing or prohibiting the practice. Most of the other cities we also surveyed also had nighttime restrictions, Pasadena and some other cities. So there was not a lot that we could learn from other cities as far as changing state ordinances or local ordinances or the state law. So having conferred with the research and working with the city attorney's office, what we had prepared for you would be the possibility of an amendment. If this committee and council chooses to, then the city attorney would prepare the amending ordinance, which would then allow taxi cabs equipped with a dome light, limited to one taxi per residence, be able to park in accordance with all the posted parking restrictions and so forth. So, we've looked at it. I think, again, it becomes really a policy decision. Operationally, we don't see this as a huge problem out there. We do think it's important for this committee and council to consider the residents and the neighborhoods and how this would impact their parking as this is moved forward.
Have any of them had permit in any of the cities where they actually get a permit?
Just the city of San Marino has a permit program for all commercial type vehicles. It's not limited, and that's an administrative permit to do business. It's almost like a license to do business in that city. Pasadena and another city they do have permits where it's not specific to commercial. It's permits for their the restrictions for their nightly ordinances that they have established. But again, going through those cities, we did not find a specific language or ordinance change that was in their codes that issues that relate specifically to commercial vehicles and or taxis in residential areas.
Before we hear from the public comment cards, do either of you have questions on this item?
Well, I don't exactly remember what the problem was. Was it people, taxi cab drivers who, at their residence?
Yeah, a few taxi drivers complained that they live in the neighborhood or their residence and they're unable to find parking in other areas of the city, so they want to park their vehicle in front of their residence. However, the way our ordinance is written, that commercial vehicles are not allowed to park beyond 3 hours in residential
districts. How many tickets were issued?
705 in 3 years. This comes out to, when we have about 2,300 drivers, came out to 0.15 ticket per driver.
Or 1 ticket per driver for every 3 years. or 1/3 of all the drivers getting cited every 3 years. But there are probably multiple offenses, the same people parking at home.
Yeah, this isn't you're right, Councilmember, this isn't a broad problem. I think.
How much, if somebody gets one of these tickets, does it affect their insurance? There's just the parking?
No, it's just the parking. It's not a moving violation. It's just a parking violation. I believe it's $45. I think it's for 48
No, they can't
or
park in
55.
their driveway, right?
If the residence has a driveway, then yeah, anybody can obviously park either in the garage or in the driveway.
Illegal.
I'm sorry?
I thought it was illegal.
No, park on the street.
No, I thought it was illegal to park in your driveway in front of your house.
A commercial vehicle?
Any vehicle.
Oh, any vehicle.
Can't park on the sidewalk or block the driveway, but
Right.
you can certainly park in your driveway.
No,
Yeah.
I thought you couldn't park in your driveway.
No, you can park in your driveway. No, you can park in your driveway.
Okay, I'll check, but I'm almost certain you cannot park.
You must have gotten a ticket there one of these days.
You can't park in the apron as it comes out to the street, but you can park in your own driveway.
I think the ordinance says you can't park in front of your house, period. Doesn't
Well, you-
exclude driveways.
You can't block the driveway.
No.
That's a state law violation.
Yeah.
But you can park in your driveway.
Yeah, I have not heard of that.
There's no violation of parking in
I
your
can
driveway.
get back to you on that, Councilmember, but I,
Google it.
Google it, okay, we'll Google
We
it.
can,
And then
and we can, okay, we've been here a long time now, so y'all getting, oh. Okay, Melise Netanyahu, Bill Rouse, and David Shapiro. Yeah, first.
Good afternoon again. Thank you very much. Before we go to the other job, at least it came in front of you, and I hope you will help us get this permit. It's really very difficult for the drivers. In some of the ordinance I heard in front of the residence, you can park one car. We don't live in a house. We live in apartments. Apartments area, if you go to Wilshire area to park in front of your house is impossible. You have to sometimes drive 2, 3, 4 blocks to park. And so it's just you have to park in front of your house. If you park 3 blocks, you get a ticket. It really doesn't make sense. If you give us at least as residents of Los Angeles, as the DOT wrote nuisance, I mean, the people like, we live in, nice people, and they really respect, and they don't feel like taxi parking and nuisance, no. And please, let's have a reserve and then park. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Melise?
Melissa Adamu. The problem of these taxis are most of the drivers, they live in apartment building. And the apartment buildings, most of them, they don't have parking space, they park on the street. That's why we're having so many tickets so many times. Most of the time, they park their cars way too far to the commercial area, and the computers, the radios, the cameras, and the meters are stolen. Majority of the time, that's what is happening. They leave it in gas stations, they pay extra money, but the next day, the computer is gone, they are going to pay $2,000, $2,500 for replacement. That's why we are asking, let them park at night time only, if it is possible, nighttime, to their houses, to their apartment areas, close to where they are living. At least, if they have an alarm, they will hear when the alarm is triggering. That's what we are asking, because this is going to cost the drivers too much money. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Rouse and David Shapiro,
afternoon.
Jose Luis, if we could ask them to come up, and Martin?
Good afternoon again. William Rouse, Yellow Cab and United Checker Cab. This issue addresses a very significant problem for the drivers. It's a problem that we've talked about for many, many years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I want to thank staff, thank you all, and express our enthusiastic support for this one. Thank you.
David Shapiro, I also say thanks. The history here is very important. When the two independent driver-owner associations, one cab each driver, came out in July of 1977, the yellow cabs were employee drivers, and they put all their drivers in their Lucas headquarters. They took their cabs out of there. and we were allowed to go home with ours. And by the way, drivers drive by their choice, day shift or night shift, so this should be a 24-hour rule. And John Haggerty, when this was brought up, promised me, the city attorney, that we would not be included. That was an absolute promise on the floor of the council at that time. And then I'm one of the people who got a ticket, and I was parked blocks from my house. My neighbors are fully respectful of me, and they won't call, but some stranger people will call. And so I would say that this was done in behalf of the Big Fleet franchise to punish the independent driver owners who take their cabs home. That history is important to know.
Thank you. Jose, followed by Martin, and then Hamid.
Me.
Yes.
Good afternoon, committee members. Martin Manukian, Yellow Cab. I deeply support the idea too. The ordinance been long there. It's an old ordinance. Doesn't work for the taxi cab industry those days, as they are regular car-sized. Examples, last year, one driver approached me that he told me that 3 days on a row he received a ticket when he went home for his lunch. I attended with him to the local clerk's office, explained the problem. They called the supervisor. Basically, they said, we will send you a letter back to find out, and never received anything. I mean, and then later came up, that's the policy, there's nothing we can do. So basically, drivers not only receiving a ticket within 24 hours, but the time they go their home to have a lunch. And I do support the idea, possibly, I mean, potentially it's on the table now, and I will appreciate your votes on yes on that. Thank you.
My name is Jose Luis Orellana from the Taxi Drivers Association. Last year, I got a total of 4 tickets for parking my cab in front of my own house. But what I understand is, why do I get a ticket, and the guy that has a van that has Direct TV, he parks right below me. There is another guy right below the street that says free smoke check. I mean, he's got big logos on the van, and the other guy has big logos on his pickup truck, but they don't get no tickets. I asked him, I said, look, neighbor, did you get a ticket? No, I did not. Did you get one? No, I did not. I said, why are they coming after me? So I asked the police, the parking enforcement officer, I said, why am I getting a ticket? He said, because it's a taxi cab. No, I said, you're giving me a ticket for commercial plates, commercial vehicle with logos. I said, what about those other 2 guys? Well, I said, somebody called it, so we're coming after you. So sometimes I get the feeling that this is kind of like, somebody's going after you. For what reason? Because we come here and talk to you and tell you what our problems are? It makes no sense. It's like discrimination to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, council members. I think this is Hamid Khan with the LA Taxi Workers Alliance. It's also very reflective of what David Shapiro said, that why people have to suffer through this whole crisis of getting parking tickets, because obviously we are looking at such acute corruption in the industry that where one would expect to have a garage, or one would have the luxury of finding an apartment where you can have 2 bedrooms and you can have parking spaces, that's not happening. Given the economic situation, given the acute poverty that the drivers are living in, there are usually 2 or 3 people who are just roommates in apartments as well. The other piece is that LA City parking is extremely difficult as it is to find. We are there, and every day we have to sometimes park our taxis 2 or 3 blocks away from the places we live. So we really appreciate that this is moving forward, but we would also ask that there's got to be some rationale to make this ordinance effective, and to really benefit the people, that not to limit it to the spot parking right in front of the house, but there should be a broader boundary that should be created. And also, this just one person, people are 2 or 3 are people are living in an apartment, so they should be factored in as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I just asked the city attorney to comment on this at all before we begin the discussion.
What specifically would you like counsel about?
We're in a catch-22. I mean, many of us understand the plight of the taxi cab drivers, and particularly that they don't go to another place. This is their vehicle, is their whole business right there. And whether or not There is a pilot program, a way in which we can look at this to carve out something for a period of time to see where the problems are, or a permit process. And I know there's been some requests to have the neighbor councils consider this. Where are we in the process of being able to do that legally?
The city council does maintain the legal authority to carve out exceptions to their general prohibition against commercial vehicles parking in residential areas. We caution any legislative effort to do so simply because having carved out exceptions for one set of commercial vehicles may give rise to legitimate arguments by a number of other commercial vehicle owners or drivers to park theirs. The department can speak to the enforcement issues and the complications attached to that. Personally, I think it's a very good idea to inform neighborhood councils and receive feedback, and we would certainly give you that advice anytime you were thinking of making exceptions to your current legislative or regulatory framework. So it is truly a policy decision. And obviously there are balances and important interests on both sides of the equation about making these changes.
I'm just curious, what are the other, let's say, nose of the dromedary argument that you're making with regard to setting a precedent? What are the other kinds of vehicles that might...
All commercial vehicles.
I know, but what...
My understanding of why the current prohibition exists is because most residents in residential neighborhoods consider it an aesthetic and other blight in their neighborhood to have commercial vehicles. So that's everything from a taxi cab to a plumbing truck to a construction truck. The law does make exceptions for commercial vehicles parking for brief periods of time when they are conducting business in neighborhoods. But that's the exception that is carved into the ordinance. The request here from the taxi drivers is that they get a permanent exemption from application of this law. And in some instances, I heard a request not just adjacent to their own residence, but period in residential areas. At least that was the request I heard from one or more of the public speakers.
We have some...
if anything, I would want to broaden it to consider other commercial vehicles that are not necessarily offensive to the community. It would have to take some research, but rather than eliminate, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of good operators who operate right out of their house, and their neighbors don't mind. But I can think of a lot of commercial vehicles, particularly cars, that aren't. Maybe we restrict it to cars that look like regular cars. I mean, I don't know, but it just seems to me that the general application is very restrictive on a lot of different. It could be potentially a lot of different uses, and it's clearly a problem for the taxi drivers. We're not providing ample parking space. It would be different in the old days when everybody lived in a house with a larger property and they had room to park their cars in their homes. That's not the case anymore. Where we have a city that is 70% rental. So where do we expect these people to live, if not in an apartment with no parking?
I'm certainly not arguing the policy with anybody who wants to make it. What I'm
saying is that policy changes, the city changes. Our city has changed dramatically. We are now a city of approaching less than 30% home ownership, 70% rental. It's a different environment. We need to change with it. If we can't expect people to live in apartments, and then look at the statistic: 2 cars per family. how can, 2 cars per family in apartments that are only have parking spaces for 1 per family, how do we justify it? Was it 1 or 2? 1, I think it's 1 per family, right? So how do you, I mean, if you don't adjust, then you're just, you're creating conditions that make it very difficult for people to live. In this case, it's affecting their income, and I just don't understand why we should be more proactive about protecting not only them, but other industries that are similarly affected. Okay, I don't want you know, trailer trucks coming into neighborhoods, and I don't even like them driving in neighborhoods. They do that, but cars that are parked when the person is doing business, as long as they're, in fact, I wouldn't restrict it to the evening hours because a lot of these guys work overnight, and it doesn't make sense to me that we restrict it to the evening because they need to sleep during the day. Otherwise, they'll drive sleepless, and that's not a good thing. And so, I mean, I can think of a lot of things. I just don't think that we're drilling down deep enough to solve what has become a larger problem than just the taxis.
I think one of the things we talked about was size as well, you know, that, you know.
What kind of vehicle, yeah.
I mean, I see those cars, what are they called, the Geek Squad or whatever, that's some that go around on the computer stuff, and they, what are they?
That's Best Buy.
That's Best Buy, okay. Anyways, they,
Those
you know,
big things
they park their cars in front of, I mean, I've seen that, I don't think we ticket them. I do think that there's been a focus on taxi cab drivers versus others because of, I don't know what reason that is, but there's
Well,
been a greater focus.
I should say that typically this is the kind of offense that typically is enforced by complaint. The beat officers, as I understand it, in traffic officer areas don't go around looking for commercial vehicles to cite. But if, in fact, the neighborhood or individuals in the neighborhood call to complain that a commercial vehicle is parked overnight in particular, but also over 3 hours in their neighborhood, then the department will deploy to cite. So the reason that people have gotten these tickets, per the regular administrative practice of the department, is that their neighbors have complained about it.
Yeah, I agree. I understand that. Believe me, I understand it as a council member, but I just think that we have to recognize that our society isn't what it used to be, and we have to adjust. And I think that this is a reasonable accommodation. But I think, if anything, we ought to look at other applications, because quite often the complaints that emerge from the community are somebody that wants to get somebody for some other reason, and they'll complain about it. You know, I'll get a complaint. I don't mind getting a complaint from somebody with a cement truck parked in front of their house. That's, get them out of there. That's a good thing. But something that's very similar to the car that the person is complaining, it has the same kind of car. I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't know. But I recognize how difficult it is. It's a very...
So they introduced the motion was introduced I was just looking, in 2007. So we've been struggling with this for a long time. I mean, it's not, it was even before the motion was introduced, to try to figure out a way to carve out something that, and what I was thinking about was whether or not we could do a pilot program during a period of time, maybe even a specific area that we look at. I don't know if there's a pilot program just on the taxi cabs, and report back in a period of time to see how that worked and see if we had a lot of complaints, because the complaints will still come in necessarily, and to be able to look at that.
I think just one other note to add to what council has mentioned to you. The other aspects are administration and enforcement. So as a program right now, where if you were talking about permits, it's definitely possible to come up with a permitting type program, but it would require staffing, and in the mayor's proposed budget, Tom is about to lose about 20-25% of his staff. There are going to be enforcement issues as far as which taxi got it, which taxi didn't. Look for a permit. You're talking about independent drivers that drive different taxis.
Can you come back to us and maybe, to look at a pilot program with taxi cabs? Look at a pilot program and how that would operate with the Department of Transportation, LAPD, a pilot program with the city attorney to carve out something that has a beginning and an end period of time, and to look at whether it's successful or not, let the neighborhood councils know that we're looking at doing this pilot program, and be able to come back.
We still would need an ordinance, because right now that would represent...
I understand that. But if, does that sound like a good idea, to try to at least see what works on this?
Well, again, I'm fine with that, but I think if you're going to do taxis, then you've got to consider some of the other businesses that have the same parking issues.
And the issue maybe, I know, but I think the issue will be,
What we want to do is identify those that...
And for whatever reason, taxi cab drivers have been targeted, and so if we can...
Some commercial vehicles are not very intrusive at all. In fact, you don't even know they're commercial vehicles. A taxi cab is yellow or red, and very noticeable, and some residents will complain about it. So...
Kind of like the dog groomers and the gardeners and a lot of other...
Yeah. But I don't know if they're complaining as much. I mean, I don't know how many tickets we give for other commercial vehicles parked in neighborhoods.
Typically, I think typically we have good compliance. I think most people who drive commercial vehicles don't park. They know they'll get ticketed, or they have been ticketed during the course of their driving life. So we get reasonably good compliance. People who are the dog groomers and the others typically don't park their cars on the streets overnight.
There's another complicating factor that we should at least mention, and that is this question of, are we talking about just City of LA permitted taxis? It's entirely possible, and for someone to drive a taxi in some other jurisdiction to live in the City of LA. So is that, those cabs included too, or?
What color are they?
Well, it could be any. Or it could be a completely unlicensed cab, but it looks like a cab.
The enforcement part, I think, Councilwoman, needs to be looked at, and to be honest with you, it's without, even with the ordinance, you almost have to basically just, if you see a taxi, just stay away, to try to figure out, without the necessary resources, to see if that was permitted, if it's...
I'm not suggesting the permitting. I'm just suggesting...
Yeah, no, I'm just talking in general. We just need to kind of look at it all together. And in the report, we did provide a lot of information for you, and I'd like to just clear the fact that we are not targeting taxi drivers, as Shelley mentioned.
I think it probably is complaint driven, and it's targeted by the people who don't like the color or whatever. All I'm saying is they're getting more tickets than other commercial vehicles, for whatever reason that is.
Could be, I don't know.
I don't have the stats, but we do issue for commercial vehicles, regardless of the color of the commercial vehicle, regardless of the size. We do that.
Again, I'll go back. I'm not saying the department is targeting them. I'm just saying that most people know that is a vehicle that is a commercial vehicle versus one that may just happen to have a sign on the side. They don't call it as often, I would assume, but I could be wrong. So can we have this again? I don't know if it's going to be in the 2 weeks. I'm looking at Claire. We keep adding things for 2 weeks from now, but to look at how we might be able to do an ordinance and a pilot program for taxi cabs. And then look at the larger issue. I mean, you're right, Mr. Alarcon, but I think we'll probably be here another year and a half from now if we don't start small. And this, yeah.
And Councilwoman, you mentioned notifying neighborhood councils. Is that a direction where we would provide this report or a concept of a pilot and find out what areas of the city, somebody's willing for us to?
I think whatever your normal process is in notifying the neighborhood councils.
Okay.
Why don't we let the neighborhood councils permit them?
Yeah. I need a job statement. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Going to go back to item number 5.
That's what the neighborhood council and the taxi drivers' neighbors want.
Well, our goal would be 2 weeks, but it may be a month. 2 weeks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I know we've been here 3 hours and 15 minutes, and Jim, come on up.
Item 5 is DOT reports relative to the status of the city's efforts on safety loop reauthorization.
They're going to do the presentation. Okay.
I can give you some overview of the process.
Okay, Michael, you're on.
Okay. You may remember that we started this process at the end of last year. We started putting together a list. We started with the old We started with projects that weren't funded in the 2007 call. We asked people for additional projects. We had a list. And then Jim came and told us that, what are you doing? You need to focus on the stimulus money. And so we shifted gears and we spent a lot of time and effort on the economic stimulus projects. Then the call came along, and now we're back to the safety lou reauthorization earmark projects. There have been a few changes from the previous earmarks. One of the things is that before, the earmarks could be used on almost anything. But I think they're trying to be a little bit more policy-oriented and less free on those. And so they're saying the projects need to be eligible for the normal Highway Trust Fund kind of projects. So they must be on federal aid to highway streets, so no local streets this time. And they're doing some other things where they're trying to check up on all that. But what you have here is a list. As far as we know, we were getting projects even through this morning. And so this is really hot off the presses. It's a work in progress. If people still have projects, I guess we will entertain them to the extent that we can. And I guess Jim wanted to volunteer to talk a little bit about the process going forward.
And just as I was just here, I think the time they had Safety Lou, maybe the last time, because it was 7 years ago, right? 7 years ago that they did Safety Lou?
Yes. It's a 6-year bill. They started 7 years ago.
Right.
It took them almost 2 years to pass the bill.
Right. But I think that, as I recall, and Mr. Parks, a member, had a special review because some congressional districts were more successful in their earmarking during that process than others, and to make sure that we were ready, willing, and able to get them to our congressional members. So the process really is that, Jim, is that each congressional member makes their determination pretty much as to what they want to put forward. We give ideas, but the ultimate decision is by those congressional members.
That's correct. And what we've tried to do is to have dialogue and discussion with those congressional members ahead of time so we know what their interests are and to share with them some of the ideas of things we're thinking about too. But it's their request, and it's just like the annual appropriations earmarked. It's something that they have to decide that they're interested in putting forward.
So you talked to most of the council offices, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. About ideas, and you got from other departments the items that are in this process. Okay. Colleagues, Mr. Parks, Mr. Alexon?
Let me just ask, on the projects for CD8, are these, any of these coming out of our recent study of South LA?
I believe they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike Hernandez sent us a list. And I believe there are several projects, several intersections that we're focused on as a result of that study.
And then that didn't exhaust the entire study. That was just those that elevated the ratings. We still have other recommendations that are in the study.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the study.
I think you guys did this study.
Somebody in our department did the study.
Okay. All right. The thing is, but if you could look at that, because one of the things we want to make sure, and we did that study specifically be ready for this funding opportunity, but if we've moved some of the higher projects out, we don't want to lose track of the other ones, because it's taken us 3 years to get that study done. And if there's other opportunities, MTA or something, we want to just make sure that, and I think you've heard this before, is that the area south of the Santa Monica Freeway and west of the Harbor Freeway, we've not gotten any success in getting transportation issues addressed. And so that's what the big push for us is.
Mr. Alacon, did you have any questions? Fine. Okay. That must have been you guys did your work with Mr. Alacon.
Yes, good staff.
I was going to say, there's some good, I see a lot of projects here, so we're going to have to fight with Mr.
It's just the seventh on the first couple of pages.
Oh.
I'm sure it's a very fair spread.
I'm sure it is. Well, but, and we have this.
One of them, I think, is listed as my district. I don't even think it's my district.
We share a common Congress member, so we'll see.
There's a few changes that need to be made as far as cleaning up some of the...
Okay, you'll get that copy to us before we get to council?
Yes, absolutely.
We do have one public comment card. Mr. Sachs.
Oh, could I ask, I do have one question. I noticed you say jet outs in the reports. I thought it was jut outs. I thought it was J-U-T outs, jut outs, instead of jet outs.
Jut outs.
It's jet outs, because everywhere in the report it's referred to as jet outs. So,
Very good technique. Yes. Mr. Shapiro, you were in
I
public
was right,
comment?
it's jet outs.
I was.
Mr. Shapiro, you're in public comment. Do you want to comment on this item? On this item?
Yeah, I had, who submitted a card,
You had it on public comment.
public comment.
Oh, this is for the public comment on this item, but we'll go ahead and have you talk as well. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. My concerns, as with the plan put forward by the mayor's office for the stimulus fund, is the overlapping of these projects. Just did a quick read through of this. In Congressional District 35 and 34, there's a call for dash buses for the Chesterfield Square, for 6 buses in each one, 35 and 34. Vermont and Maine, 4 dash buses for each congressional district, 35 and 34. It's listed twice. The Lincoln Chinatown, District 32 and 34 listed twice, 6 dash buses. The El Sereno City Terrace, Districts 32 and 34, 7 dash buses. So you have a repetition of project and a repetition of call for funding. That's my problem here. That's just quickly. The same thing happened with the mayor's call for projects for the stimulus funding, and it's a concern.
Thank you. And I think what they've done is there are 2 different congressional offices, and whichever one they can be successful with. They won't be double funded. They'll be able to see which congressional office.
It's easy to say that, but it could be double funded, and conversely,
Thank you, Mr. Sachs.
the
I was just
opposite can happen
responding.
too.
Mr. Shapiro.
David Shapiro, if you'd allow me just a little extra, just a little, I want to make 2 comments. One is a request to you all as council and Mayor Pro Tem that I made on May 18th, 2008, a formal request to the DOT Taxi Commission that I be allowed under the Brown Act into the meetings where the industry and/or labor people were openly invited. And the LA Times just did an article saying that Brown Act is violated everywhere. And so I'm making that request again, and I hope that it'll be honored. Very importantly, whereas you refer to re-franchising all the time, with the coming months that you're going to be considering the taxi system, I ask you please to not use the word franchising. Franchising is outdated. I'm going to come to you personally with my 32 years of experience in writing, suggesting a medallion system that can work. And I ask that you not, because of the lobbying, just not consider a medallion system for the franchise system, which is outdated, really.
And I think as mentioned by the department that they are looking at everything from medallions to franchises to all that will be part of the study to look and what that.
Okay, but I never hear that spoken, and even when I was here, I couldn't get my language in, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with the item number 5, we will move approval to the council, and they'll have a new document that has some.
Well, we'll approve as amended the report that was submitted today.
Thank you, colleagues. This is probably the longest meeting we've had.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for the record, the committee is approving item number 3, the report relative to the transfer of jurisdiction and control to DOT for the Santa Monica.
Yes, we had a quorum. Apologies, we did not have a quorum then, both on number 1 and number 3. Mr. Alacon is in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I told him. You're right. Thank you, Mr. Parks.
Thank you.
I'm just getting you prepared for budget.
Oh, thank you.